Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to the Costco campus expansion. For tonight, we're going to be having a community conference and a public hearing. And so if you wish to speak, if you're members of the public, I'd like you to sign in on the table up here. And we'll, when you get ready to speak, we'll ask you to go up and state your name and address, and then we'll listen to what you have to say. We have we have an administrative process that we have to go through. We have some minutes from June 6th, which was our last meeting, which was quite a while ago, but that we have to approve. So I'll ask the members of the commission if they've had a chance to review those and would look for a motion on that.
Motion to approve the June 6, 2018 Development Commission meeting minutes. Mr. Chair.
Great.
Second.
Great. Any discussion, corrections? All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Looks like we approved the minutes. So I think, Lucy, we'll turn the time over to you.
Good evening. I'm Lucy Sloman, Land Development Manager for DSD. And tonight we start the first of two nights, two-part public hearing for the Costco Development Agreement. Jean Lynn will be making the presentation. I'm taking you through the quasi-judicial piece of the agenda. I am going to just do a little bit abbreviated since most of you are overly familiar with this deck of slides. So as a quasi-judicial matter, things need to be handled like a court, which means the proceedings are both fair and appear fair. We do this through two different processes. One is procedural due process. The other is substantive due process. Procedural due process, as the name indicates, it's the procedures that we use. We provide notice. All the discussion is on the record, available for everyone. And we also explore the relationships between the applicant and the decision makers. Substantive due process essentially means that the basis for which we make a decision is adopted codes. So what I would like to ask the commissioners to do first is to read through the questions that are up here, and then I'll ask you a series of questions. How many of you would answer no to all the questions? No yeses. Okay, that's great. And then the second piece, as I mentioned, has to do with that all the communications have to be on the record. Ex parte communications are discussions that you might have had outside of these chambers, not on the microphone, not part of the record. And so my question to you is, has anyone had any ex parte communications regarding this permit?
No.
Okay, great. And if the applicant chooses to challenge any of the commissioners, please do so during your presentation. And that's it.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Jean Lynn. I'm a senior planner with the City of Issaquah Development Services Department, and I'm also the project planner for the proposed development. We've received 3 pieces of correspondence on the project after the publication of the staff report. The comments have been distributed to the development commissioners, and extra copies are available up front. The Colors and Materials Board is also available for viewing tonight as well, if you wish. The proposal before you tonight is the Costco campus expansion project, which consists of 2 discrete land use applications: an administrative site development permit, or ASDP, and a site development permit, or SDP, with 2 distinct review processes. While they're listed as 2 separate items on tonight's agenda, I'll be making one comprehensive presentation for both. The following meeting sequence is proposed to help organize the presentations and discussions. We start off with a staff presentation on the ASDP, or Administrative Site Development Permit, and Site Development Permit, followed by the applicant's presentation. We then proceed with receiving public comments on both applications. After public comments, we'll proceed with the community conference for the Administrative Site Development Permit, with discussion by the Development Commission. And finally, we'll hold the public hearing for the Site Development Permit, with discussion by the Development Commission. Members of the public who are interested in speaking should sign in at the clipboard at the front of the room. As you listen to the presentation, consider presenting your comments around each building separately, since the Development Commissions will have to have 2 separate conversations, one on each building. So this is just a quick overview of the themes of this presentation. I'm going to start by providing some background on the existing development agreement and highlighting the elements from the agreement that are relevant to this project. Given that we're looking at 2 discrete land use permits, I'll explain the different review criteria and what the Development Commission's roles are with respect to each permit. In our analysis of the project, I'll be focusing on connectivity of the circulation system, as well as the visual connectivity through views and the quality of open spaces provided as part of the development, and the building and site design elements that emphasize the urban streetscape and the pedestrian experience. The Costco corporate campus is located in central Issaquah, and it's bounded by Interstate 90 to the south, Pickering Pond and Pickering Place Shopping Center to the west, Northwest Sammamish Road to the north, and the Issaquah Creek Corridor to the east. Within the campus, the retail warehouse is at the north end. Office buildings 1, 2, and 3 are along Pickering Pond in the western portion of the campus, and the existing parking garage and trading building are at the eastern portion of the campus. The proposed buildings 4 and 5 would be at the southern end of the campus. The site for Building 4 is highlighted in orange, and Building 5 is highlighted in green. The proposed development is planned across 2 existing lots bisected by the future extension of Lake Drive. The project site is currently developed with 2 surface parking lots that serve Costco's existing corporate campus buildings. So a little bit of background on the project. In 1987, the city approved a master site plan for the coordinated development of Pickering Place, which was consistent with the city's vision at the time. In the intervening 25 years or so, the city's vision for this area has evolved, and the city adopted the Central Issaquah Plan and Development and Design Standards. The development agreement, which was approved in 2015, would implement the Central Issaquah Plan and associated standards. With the development agreement, Costco may build up to 1.5 million square feet of new development on their properties over 30 years. These include the property Costco owned at the time the development agreement was approved, as well as properties they may acquire with the expansion areas. The development agreement relies on the Central Issaquah standards as the primary land use regulations with the development agreement, coupled with the interpretations and adjustments to address unique and specific characteristics of Pickering Place. So one of the major purposes of the development agreement was to establish a partnering agreement between the city and Costco for funding road improvements that are necessary in the Pickering Place area to accommodate the planned growth. The Master Transportation Funding Agreement identified 3 transportation projects that would create transportation capacity for Costco and the larger community, and provide substantial public benefits for circulation and for enabling growth of businesses and jobs. The first of these projects is the East Lake Sammamish Parkway, which included road widening between Southeast 56th Street and Southeast Issaquah Fall City Road, and that was completed in 2016. That's denoted by the number 1 on the map. The 12th Avenue Northeast and 17th Avenue Northwest SR 900 project includes adding turn lanes, bicycle lanes, and sidewalk improvements. Timing for this project has been delayed to allow for coordination with Lake Sammamish State Park, and this is denoted by the number 2 on the map. Finally, the Southeast 62nd Street Extension Project includes the widening and extension of Southeast 62nd Street to the west to meet the southerly extension of Lake Drive within the Costco campus. It's currently under construction and scheduled for completion later this year. And this is noted as number 3 on the map. I'll describe this in a bit more detail in the next slide. So once completed, the Southeast 62nd Street Extension Project would provide an integral east-west connection from Lake Drive to East Lake Sammamish Parkway. The project includes extension of the southern leg of Lake Drive within the Costco corporate campus, with a roundabout at that intersection. Additional improvements include upgrades to the existing Pickering Trail. For reference, the sites for buildings 4 and 5 are outlined in red in the map. The land plan is contained in Exhibit D of the development agreement, and it's a high-level site development permit establishing one scenario for how the development agreement could be implemented. The land plan shows office buildings with under-building parking at the sites of both buildings 4 and 5. You should note also that there's a small parking lot on the north end of Building 5 between Building 5 and existing Building 3. Per the development agreement, proposals that are consistent with the land plan are reviewed administratively following a community conference. Proposals over 150,000 square feet that represent a major alteration to the land plan shall follow Central Issaquah standard processes. This will be discussed in more detail later on with the review criteria discussion. The development agreement establishes a sustainability component that has sustainability goals and implementing tools. As a requirement, new developments are required to implement a leadership innovation that targets energy-efficient performance and a technology innovation that focuses on techniques and technologies that could benefit the community by demonstration. Some of the notable elements from Costco's proposed sustainability approach include establishing an energy use intensity design target, establishing water reduction targets, installation of solar panels, achieving LEED Silver equivalent energy performance targets, and providing an energy feedback display that will be viewable by Costco staff and the public. The proposed development includes the construction of 2 new buildings as part of Costco's corporate campus. This includes a 9-story office building and a 10-story parking garage. The buildings are needed to bring approximately 2,000 current employees onto the main campus, as well as to accommodate future growth. The proposed office building is anticipated to accommodate up to 4,300 employees. Both building sites would include structured parking and outdoor community spaces. Building 4, which is the office building, would be located on the northeast corner of Lake Drive and Southeast 62nd Street, with Costco's existing two-story trading building to the north and the Issaquah Creek corridor to the east. The building is approximately 600,000 square feet, and its footprint on the street level is separated into two discrete wings, with a through-block passage between the west and east wings and a sky bridge connecting these wings on the upper floors. Ground floor active uses include the main entry lobby, meeting rooms, and cafeteria. There's also an auditorium and service uses on the ground floor. This building frames several outdoor spaces, including the Central Court Plaza, 62nd East Plaza, and Creekside Terrace. Building 5, the parking structure, would be located on the northeast corner of Lake Drive and Southeast 62nd Street, with Costco's existing three-story Building 3 office building to the north and Pickering Pond to the west. At the street level, this building is also separated into two wings, with a through-block passage between the north and south wings. These wings are fully connected on the upper levels. The building is L-shaped, where the narrower north wing is designed around the existing loading area and garage ramp serving Building 3. And that would largely screen these vehicular and service uses from views along Lake Drive. On the ground floor, there would be approximately 30,000 square feet of exhibition and fitness space, wrapping much of the parking, utility, and service uses at the interior of the site. And finally, a sky bridge across Lake Drive is proposed to provide an internal connection between the two buildings on the upper floors. The zoning for the property is urban core, which is shaded in pink. And the intent of this zone is to provide a dense, vibrant, pedestrian-friendly urban environment with active first floors that provide pedestrian interest. The proposed development includes high-density office and office support uses, which are permitted in the urban core zone. Surrounding properties within Pickering Place, Costco's corporate campus, and properties south of Interstate 90 are also within the urban core. As mentioned earlier, the Costco campus expansion project consists of two discrete permits, an administrative site development permit for Building 4 and a site development permit for Building 5, even though it's presented in the same staff report. Our intent is to promote a comprehensive analysis of the overall development, to reduce redundancy and still provide the site-specific analysis that would have been provided had this been separated into two staff reports. Our intent is also to retain the distinct levels of Development Commission review, roles, and purview as established by the Costco Development Agreement. The proposed Building 4 is substantially consistent with the land plan, which shows an office building with under-building parking. The proposal does not meet any of the major alteration thresholds defined in the development agreement, and only minor alterations are proposed. According to the development agreement, the proposals that are consistent with the land plan are reviewed administratively, except that during the review process, an informal community conference will be held with the Development Commission. The community conference is an opportunity to invite conversation and receive input from the commission and the public. Following the community conference, staff will use this input in the preparation of an administrative decision. And tonight serves as the community conference for the ASDP for Building 4. Proposed Building 5 is a parking garage, whereas it's shown as an office building with underground parking in the land plan. As originally contemplated in the land plan, the existing Costco parking garage adjacent to Pickering Barn was intended to serve both existing and new buildings. But Costco chose to build another garage next to Building 4. Another change that results from the major alteration of the land plan is the elimination of the small parking lot between buildings 3 and 5, where a new plaza is now proposed. This is a beneficial change, and it's in greater compliance with the central Issaquah standards. For these reasons, Building 5 is not substantially consistent with the land plan and is a major alteration requiring more traditional Development Commission review. The site development permit review process would follow the 2-meeting format, where the first meeting will feature presentations by both staff and the applicant, followed by the Development Commission and public comments, questions, and concerns. The second meeting will be responses to these comments, questions, and concerns, in addition to the standard briefing response memo. The applicant's also requesting 2 administrative adjustment of standards that would apply to both buildings 4 and 5. These requests include modifying the loading space and tree retention requirements. Both of these will be discussed in more detail later. And the decision, for these administrative adjustments of standards will be part of the Development Commission's consideration on the administrative site development permit and the Development Commission's decision on the site development permit. A third administrative adjustment of standards will be requested as part of the 3-block passage design at Building 5, and that will be discussed in more detail later in the presentation. With respect to environmental review, a planned action environmental impact statement was adopted for the Central Issaquah Sub-Area Plan in 2012. The purpose of the planned action environmental impact statement was to address environmental impacts up front in order to facilitate and expedite environmental review for future individual development projects and to streamline the permit review process. When the development projects are proposed that are consistent with the environmental impact statement analysis, no additional environmental review or separate SEPA determination is required. A planned action determination was adopted in 2014 as part of the Costco development agreement. The planned action determination evaluated impacts as part of the development agreement for future build-out of Costco's corporate headquarters for up to 1.5 million square feet of additional office development. No additional SEPA review is required if future proposals are consistent with the Costco development agreement and the planned action determination. The proposed development for buildings 4 and 5 were evaluated and found to be consistent with the planned action determination, and no significant adverse environmental impacts were identified. With respect to pedestrian circulation, per the Central Issaquah standards, additional pedestrian circulation facilities need to be provided where the block lengths exceed 300 feet. Pedestrian connectivity per the land plan requires an incremental build-out of the pedestrian system between Lake Drive and the existing shared use routes. A traditional grid block street system couldn't be applied to Costco's corporate campus due to the site configuration and adjacency to Issaquah Creek and Pickering Pond. The existing shared use routes of the Pickering Trail to the east and the Pickering Pond Trail to the west are approximately 300 feet from Lake Drive, and they would provide north-south connections. However, it's necessary to provide regular connections between Lake Drive and the shared use routes to meet the requirements for east-west connectivity. As envisioned in the land plan, the east-west through-block passages would be provided at buildings 4 and 5, as circled in yellow in the graphic on top. The proposed east-west through-block passages are circled in blue in the graphic on the bottom and provides pedestrian connections to the existing shared-use routes. At Building 4, this pedestrian route is located at the northern edge of the site and is adjacent to the trading building. It extends from Lake Drive to the Pickering Trail. At Building 5, the pedestrian route is located approximately midpoint along Lake Drive frontage in the area separating the building's north and south wings and extends to the pond overlook and Pickering Pond Trail. Additionally, a north-south through-block passage at Building 4 is provided between the east and west wings of this building at the street level, and it provides a connection between the Central Court Plaza and the 62nd East Plaza on the site. The eastern segment of the through-block passage pedestrian route would be adjacent to the trading building, with Building 4 just to the south. At the east end, the path would cross the trading building's loading and service area. Building 4's loading and service area is also just to the south, and while it's functionally logical to have these uses at this location, it could be a pedestrian-unfriendly area, where the route doesn't give pedestrians equal priority to vehicles. The blue oval on the drawing shows the location where this conflict occurs. And the photo on the right shows the existing loading area at the trading building. We've included condition 3, which would require that the pedestrian path be designed to prioritize pedestrians and to minimize conflicts with the truck loading area. Costco anticipates redeveloping the trading building in the future. However, this condition will ensure that this path works now, since the timing of the trading building redevelopment is unknown. At Building 5, the proposed alignment and design of the through-block passage presents some challenges, as it has to negotiate through an area that is predominantly designed for vehicles. So Building 5 is the parking garage, and the diagram on top shows the proposed alignment in blue, which does not provide a direct route and requires pedestrians to cross 2 vehicular areas, which are circled in orange. The diagram on the bottom shows a straighter alignment, although there's still 2 points where the pedestrians would need to cross vehicular paths. The secondary through-block passage standard requires 13 feet overall width, with 5 feet of tread and 4 feet of landscaping on either side. While the western end of this route can likely comply given the landscaped area, the eastern end negotiates through the building, where it'll be difficult for plants to grow and where the width is limited. Condition 4 is proposed as a preliminary condition to require an administrative adjustment of standards to remove the landscape border where the route passes through the building and replace it with a slightly wider trail. It also requires building design enhancements to compensate for the removal of the landscape border. The applicant intends to pursue the administrative adjustment of standards to provide greater clarity to the design of this route, and that'll be reviewed as part of the briefing response memo during the Development Commission's second meeting. Should this preliminary condition be adequately addressed at that time, it will not warrant inclusion in the final conditions of approval. The primary streets providing access to the proposed development include Lake Drive and Southeast 62nd Street, both of which are core streets and are shown in the dark blue. Core streets create a livable street character with pedestrian and bicycle priority, where active ground floor uses are encouraged, and it promotes walkability. As mentioned before, both of these streets are currently under construction. In this diagram, vehicular driveway access points are noted with red arrows. Truck loading areas are called out with the letter L in the pink circle, and parking access is noted with the letter P in the blue circle. For Building 4, one driveway along Lake Drive would provide access to the auto court circular passenger loading area, the at-grade loading area at the north end of the building, and the ramp for the underground garage. The same driveway would also provide access to the existing loading docks and service area on the south side of the trading building. For Building 5, 2 driveways would be serving this site, one along Lake Drive at the through-block passage, and the second would be along Southeast 62nd Street at the southwest corner of the building. Both driveways would provide access to the existing service area and garage ramp at Building 3, which minimizes the number of driveways serving both buildings. Central Issaquah standards requires developments to make axial views and vistas to be the focal points. Additionally, the land plan requires that building designs explore opportunities to highlight territorial views and vistas. The build-out of Lake Drive has resulted in a straighter alignment than was contemplated in the development agreement. And this has enabled a stronger view corridor of the Issaquah Alps to the south. The design of the Sky Bridge over Lake Drive intentionally incorporates a high level of transparency as required by the development agreement, which improves access and frames views of the Issaquah Alps. The Sky Bridge would connect level 4 in Building 4 and level 5 in Building 5. These renderings show the mountain views as they're seen along Lake Drive. The two renderings on the left show anticipated views from the through-block passages. The rendering on top shows views looking east towards Issaquah Creek, and the rendering on the bottom shows views looking west towards Pickering Pond. The eastern through-block passage, which is north of Building 4 and adjacent to the trading building, provides a mostly direct route that ends at the Issaquah Creek corridor, with the natural habitat as the focal point. The western through-block passage is approximately 15 feet in height, where it goes through Building 5, which will likely allow for views of Pickering Pond as the focal point. An existing example on the Costco campus is at the Building 1 Sky Bridge, as shown in the photo on the bottom right. Although, note that the Sky Bridge is narrower than the through-block passage through Building 5. The Central Issaquah Standards requires new projects to retain 25% of the total diameter of significant and landmark trees in the existing tree stock. There are a total of 140 significant and landmark trees on the property, with a total of 1,535 caliper inches. And 25% of that would be 384 caliper inches. The applicant is proposing to modify this requirement through an administrative adjustment of standards to allow all of the trees to be removed. Proposed tree removals are noted by red circles on this plan. Many of these trees are in the parking lots and along the edges were planted when the parking lot and Pickering Place were developed in the 1990s. There's clusters of significant trees along the eastern and western edges of the site, adjacent to the Issaquah Creek corridor and Pickering Pond. Over the years, these trees have thrived due to their adjacency to open spaces. Staff and the applicant have explored ways to preserve these trees at the edges, but it wasn't possible because they would be significantly impacted by the proposed grading activities and utility installations as part of the development. As a result, these trees are proposed for removal. New landscaping, including trees and green screens, are proposed to be planted along these edges to help mitigate the impact. The project proposes approximately 1,800 vehicular parking spaces, which meets the minimum required. All of the parking serving the proposed development would either be under the building or in structured parking. Existing parking facilities throughout Costco's corporate campus would include existing surface lots, under-building garages, and the 8-story parking garage. Currently, all of the bicycle parking is proposed in Building 5, and no bicycle parking at Building 4, which is inconsistent with the Central Issaquah standards. Condition 12 would ensure that at least 25% of the required bicycle parking would be provided at Building 4, and that bicycle parking would be placed in close proximity to primary building entrances without blocking pedestrian circulation facilities. At this point of the presentation, I'm going to switch from elements that apply equally to both buildings to information relevant only to the community conference for the office building. While Building 4 is a large and dense building, It does comply with the development standards of the urban core zone. Proposed community spaces at this site include the Central Court Plaza, 62nd East Plaza, and Creekside Terrace. These spaces range from the formal and urban plazas to the informal and nature-focused terrace. The Central Court Plaza is centrally located along Lake Drive, and it extends to the interior of the site, where it's framed by Building 4's east and west wings. A through-block passage between the two wings connects this plaza to the 62nd East Plaza. Primary entries to the building front on this plaza, including the main entry lobby, cafeteria, and dining areas. Some of the proposed amenities include a variety of seating options, formal landscaping and tree wells and raised planter beds, and decorative paving. The tree wells in the plazas will be located above the underground garage in order to ensure that there will be sufficient soil for trees to thrive. Condition 6 is included to require minimum dimensions and depths for the tree wells. The Creekside Terrace outdoor amenity space is located at the rear of the building, and it overlooks Issaquah Creek corridor. In contrast to the more urban environment of the plazas, the terrace highlights the adjacent natural environment. Some of the amenities in this space include a wood deck area, informal plantings, and a curvilinear path with pockets of seating. The southwestern corner of the building is located at the street intersection. This building corner is required to have a minimum of 60 feet of building frontage at the Build 2 line to maintain a continuous street wall. Building 4 has approximately 150 feet extending from the corner along both streets, and that's noted by the blue line above. Other areas where the building is located within the Build 2 line are also noted with the blue line, and areas where the plazas and landscape elements would help define the street edge are noted in green. Building entries are noted with the red asterisks and open onto the community spaces and the streets. The building's ground floor is designed to incorporate active uses, including the main entry lobby, meeting rooms, and staff cafeteria. Elevations at the ground floor incorporate a brick base with bays of glazed storefront windows and canopies. And rendering suggests a high level of transparency between the interior and exterior spaces. Breaking up the glazed storefront with bays, coupled with the canopies, helps make the building more pedestrian scaled. Primary entrances to these active uses face both the plaza and the street, and the canopies are 6 feet in depth, are proposed at the building entries and across at least 75% of the building facade, and they provide weather protection. Where the building is set back from the property line, the sidewalk would be extended up to the building. The land plan requires that the presence of buildings be maximized at the corners. Many building corners incorporate special treatment to highlight the importance of these locations. Corner lanterns are located at prominent building corners and consist of clear glass curtain walls with opaque glass spandrels, extending from the ground floor all the way to the top floor. When it's lit, the vertical volume lights up like a lantern. The northern elevation, the corner lantern is located at the building corner above the main entry, and which would be a prominent feature along Lake Drive, and that's outlined in red. On the south elevations, the corners of both buildings at the street intersection feature similar corner lantern elements. And accent panel cladding at the ends of both buildings help bookend the buildings on Costco's corporate campus, and they're outlined in orange. The Sky Bridge across Lake Drive, coupled with the Central Court Plaza and Auto Court at Building 4, would convey an impressionable sense of arrival along Lake Drive. Additionally, corner building treatment design elements on buildings 4 and 5, such as the corner lanterns and accent panel cladding bookends, would help frame this entry portal. While the building is designed with detail, none of the facades is treated as the backside. There are locations where the brick base creates blank walls that need further articulation or modulation. The southeast corner of the building, where the proposed auditorium is located, is designed with a continuous stretch of blank masonry wall that wraps around the corner, and that's outlined in red in the diagram above. These walls would be prominent along 62nd Street, as well as from the Pickering Trail, and they don't represent a pedestrian-friendly design. The applicant proposes to treat this corner with landscaping, which includes raised landscape planters with evergreen shrubs and trees. But given the length of this corner and its prominence, landscaping alone isn't sufficient, and additional surface relief would be needed to help break up its massing. There's a section of blank wall on the west elevation at the northwest corner of the building that fronts on the ramp to the underground garage. It's outlined in red in the bottom drawing. This section of blank wall is visible but set back from Lake Drive, and conceptual landscape plans show landscaping between the wall and the edge of the garage ramp, as well as on the other side of the ramp. Given the conceptual nature of the landscape plans, it's difficult to determine whether, at this stage, if the proposed landscape treatment is sufficient or if additional treatment would be needed. Condition 10 has been included to require treatment of the blank walls on the southeast corner and west elevations. Treatment would include articulation or other techniques, with landscaping applied as a secondary feature. Development on the Building 4 site includes removal of a 561 square foot wetland at the southeast corner of the parcel. This is the only wetland on the project site, and it's not part of a wetland complex. The wetland has a Category 4 rating, which is indicative of wetlands that are heavily disturbed and have low habitat function. According to the Issaquah Municipal Code, wetlands that are less than 2,500 square feet in size and that are not part of a wetland complex may be altered if mitigation is provided to demonstrate no net loss of functions or values, and no buffer is required for these wetlands. The applicant is proposing off-site mitigation through the King County Mitigation Reserves Program, which is an in-lieu fee program that allows permittees to mitigate impacts through the purchase of credits. Applicants would pay a fee to King County, and this would be used to restore, establish, enhance, and/or preserve wetland, river, stream, and buffer within the same watershed as the impact. Condition 14 would prohibit any removal of the wetland until off-site mitigation has been provided. At this point of the presentation, I'm going to switch to information relevant only to the public hearing for the parking garage. So Building 5 is a large, dense building that is close to reaching the maximum allowable building envelope. Its floor area ratio is low due to the fact that areas used for parking don't count towards the floor area ratio. This building complies with the development standards of the urban core zone. Proposed community spaces at the site include North Plaza and 62nd West Plaza. While not proposed as a community space, the pond overlook adds to the variety of open space options for future users. Similar to the Creekside Terrace at Building 4, the pond overlook takes advantage of its proximity to and highlights the natural habitat around Pickering Pond, and it provides a direct connection to the Pickering Pond Trail. North Plaza is located on the west side of Lake Drive between Building 5 and existing Building 3. These adjacent buildings help frame this new triangular plaza, as well as provide a transitional open space between these two buildings. The adjacent exhibit space on the ground floor of Building 5 have entries onto this plaza, and its storefront windows provide transparency between the indoor and outdoor spaces. The amenities that are suggested for this plaza include an art feature, a variety of seating options, formal landscaping and tree wells and planter beds, and decorative paving. Buildings are required to be located at the Build 2 line of 0 to 10 feet in the urban core zone in order to help define the street edge, with some allowance for architectural and landscape elements to help define this edge. Due to the curvilinear nature of the adjacent streets, the development agreement allows buildings to meet the purpose and intent of the central Issaquah standards rather than the strict letter of this standard. At the street corners, buildings are also required to have a minimum street presence of 60 feet of building frontage at the Build 2 line. In the diagram on the left, areas where the building is located within the Build 2 line are noted in the blue line. And areas where the plazas and landscape elements would help define the street edge are noted in green. Active ground floor uses consisting of exhibit space and fitness center wrap around the majority of the building's street frontages. The extensive use of storefront windows provide a high level of transparency. And primary entrances to these active uses face both the plaza and the street. Canopies that are 6 feet in depth are proposed at the building entries, and deep eave overhangs over the southwest corner of the building where the fitness center is located would help give the building a more pedestrian scale. Where the building is set back from the property line, the sidewalk would be extended up to the building. Building corner treatments at Building 5. These would mirror those at Building 4. So a corner lantern, which is outlined in red, would be at the street intersection. And accent paneling, outlined in orange, would bookend the Costco campus buildings. Overall, the building incorporates color, texture, and material variation that provides visual interest and helps break up the perception of building massing. But there's 2 locations where blank walls are present and where they need to be treated. On the west elevation facing the Pickering Pond Trail, there's a section of brick-clad wall to the south of the green screen that screens the driveway at that location. It's outlined in red on the elevation on top. On the north elevation, a section of blank wall extends from the generator room to the stair tower. That's also outlined in red in the elevation on the bottom. This section of wall would be adjacent to the through-block passage pedestrian path between Pickering Pond Trail and Lake Drive. And due to its visibility along these pedestrian paths, this wall would also need to be treated. Condition 11 requires treatment of the blank walls on the west and north elevations. Treatment could include articulation or other techniques, and landscaping can be applied as a secondary feature. To screen the rooftop parking from views from Building 4, from both above and from views from across and above, trellises and low perimeter walls are proposed. Trellises are proposed along most of the perimeter of the rooftop, as well as the interior of the rooftop, to provide screening from above. And these trellises are shown in orange in the floor plan on the left. The trellises would also be designed to accommodate the installation of solar panels. The perimeter wall around the roof is only 3 feet tall, where 5 feet is required due to the visibility from Building 4. And compliance with this standard would be ensured through Condition 13. So, in conclusion, staff finds that the administrative site development permit for Building 4, the office building, largely complies with the land plan and Central Issaquah plan and standards. Staff is seeking input from the Development Commission and the public as part of the community conference before proceeding with the administrative decision for this application. And this includes the associated administrative adjustment of standards. Staff finds that the site development permit for Building 5, the parking garage, is consistent with the comprehensive plan, the Central Issaquah Plan, and meets all applicable codes, rules, regulations, and policies, and complies with the applicable development agreement and land plan elements, and recommends approval for this application and associated administrative adjustments of standards. So once again, this is the proposed meeting sequence. Members of the public who are interested in speaking should sign in at the front. And as you listen to the presentation, consider presenting your comments around each building separately, since the development commissioners will have to have 2 separate conversations on each building, one on each building. So at this time, I'd like to turn this over to the applicant for their presentation. Thank you.
Very good. Is it a page down? Very good. Good evening, everyone. Mr. Chair, members of the Development Commission, my name is Jackie Frank. I'm the Vice President of Real Estate Development for Costco Wholesale. I first presented before the Development Commission, I think it was in early of 1993, which was over 25 years ago. It's been a long time. And it's been a long relationship, and we appreciate that. First of all, let me thank Jean, Lucy, Keith, and the rest of staff. Throughout this entire process, you should know staff has shown Costco as well as the design team a tremendous courtesy, a tremendous professionalism, and we really appreciate the collaborative partnership that we've developed. It's been a great working relationship, and I think you can see that as a result of, or see that reflected in the design. A couple things tonight. I want to try and put this in context for you all, and then we've got two presentations. I want to talk a little bit about the company and why we're doing this in the first place. I'd like Steve Bullock to talk a little bit about planning, constraints, and design determinants, and then Shannon Seuss will discuss the specifics as to design solutions, as to how we arrived at solutions relative to the SIDS, the CIP, and the coordination with staff. We do have representatives here from Weissman, our landscape architect, from Rushing, our MEP and sustainability consultant, and from Dowell, our civil engineer, who's helped us with utilities, grading, drainage, et cetera. So they're not planning a formal presentation, but they are here to answer any questions that you might have. Patrick Mullaney is here of Foster Pepper, who was instrumental in working with Rich Olin on the adoption of the development agreement. So if there are any questions regarding the implementation or the intent of the development agreement, Patrick can help us with that as well. So we've had a long history here. You have an aerial photograph before you. Retail warehouse in the north edge of the campus, buildings 1, 2, and 3 that have evolved since the early 90s all the way through the mid-2000s. We built the parking structure north of the trading building 2013, 2014 as well. Right now, we currently have about 480,000 square feet of office space. Of course, the retail warehouse is 160,000 square feet. The trading building, which really serves as kind of a packaging, manufacturing, and some distribution, that's about 50,000 square feet. There are currently 4,000 stalls on site, which is about 7.45 stalls per 1,000 square feet. We currently have around 3,000 employees on the campus. But the campus has been a little constraining for us. So in the mid-2000s, 2006, 2007, we leased and purchased Lake Place 1 and Lake Place 2. Those primarily house our Costco travel business, which has been a growing and successful business. That space wasn't enough for us, so subsequently we've entered into leases on the Sammamish Park Place as well as the Space Labs property to the north and to the east. Those leases were done in late 2014, early 2015. So as we started thinking about our needs, we have approximately 4,000 employees that are off-site in about 445,000 square feet of office. As we look to kind of implementing the development agreement and taking advantage of the 1.5 million square feet of development entitlements, we started looking at a couple of options. Number one, Costco is successful primarily because of its collaboration and tremendous efficiencies. And we think that having people in a cast wide around the Issaquah area is probably not as efficient as we could be. So the first thought we had was we would like to, travel will stay at Lake Place 1 and Lake Place 2, but we'd like to return about 2,500 employees who are currently off-site in leased facilities to come back to the campus and help us realize those synergies and efficiencies. But we'd also like to provide a reasonable amount of space to allow for growth of the company. The central headquarters is really intended to be a support for the remainder of the company. And we do find that there's a certain amount of population per warehouse of support for all the various support services. And we are seeing probably 3.5% to 4% of employment growth per year as we continue to grow our business really internationally. So if we take advantage of the development agreement with the intention of bringing off-site folks back to the campus, realizing those efficiencies, and then providing room for growth, it really helped us think about how we kind of marry our intentions with the City of Issaquah's intentions. And what this would give us would be about 1.1 million of square feet on campus of office space, about 5,700 total parking stalls, which nets out to about 4.4 per 1,000 square feet of square footage, which would take us up to about 7,000 on-site employees, and we would still remain with about 1,500 off-site employees, primarily for Costco travel. So just a kind of a brief highlight of our partnership and our relationship. You've all worked with Rich Olin over the years, and I've been involved since the days of the warehouse. But we've actually had a couple of other folks who've been involved with the Central Issaquah plan. As a matter of fact, both Peter Kahn and Kim Katz were represented and participated in the Citizens Advisory Committee for Central Issaquah. This is at the very early days of the CIP. They also participated on the Transportation Committee for consideration of the local transportation improvements the city would take on. And both of them have been, over time, involved with both the Chamber and the Government Affairs Committee with the City of Issaquah. All of us have been involved in the early stages of the negotiations of the development agreement, as well as various projects in Issaquah, the wetlands fill, the expansion projects, the gas design, construction, various approvals, construction of the, as well as construction of the Lake and 62nd Improvements project. It's interesting because no sooner was the development agreement completed, that is when we started thinking seriously about growth and the objective to bring our remote employees back to campus and to grow in place on campus. So when we look at our goals, number one, we want to grow our business. We want to take care of our employees, which is a key component of our mission statement. We wanted to have an integrated campus that realized the efficiencies of enhanced collaboration and proximity. And we wanted the proper square footage and adequate parking that would allow for us to stay in Issaquah, frankly, and to grow in place. We look at the city's goals. Just taking a look at the adoption of the CIP, clearly the city was anticipating growth and development. So thoughtful densification of the urban area was really wise and prudent. Hence the implementation of the CIP. And with that, the development design standards to implement the CIP in an urban way. We applaud the city's goals to enhance the public realm and to really develop public pedestrian connections, all through the use of kind of well-coordinated and well-thought-out design standards that would help guide the implementation of the city's objectives. So in that, I think we found a happy medium and an overlap of intention. So just to reiterate, our goals, once again, coming out of both Costco's goals and the city's goals, we've identified our space needs. We're trying to create a dense, high-performing facility that is inherently efficient with mobility and connectivity with the community and its vision with all of the synergies that come from that. And if we do all of this right, I think we can measure our success by having a project that really illustrates quality and value, two very, very core attributes of certainly Costco's intention, a project that's forward-looking for both ourselves and for the city of Issaquah, a respect for a design that really respects the campus context. It's interesting because we have a kind of a traditional suburban campus, low-rise buildings with curvilinear streets and some beautiful riparian natural environments. Yet we also, on the other hand, have the intent to create more of an urban vision of rectilinear streets, close setbacks. So this really represented an opportunity to balance not competing constraints, but complementary constraints in a very creative way. As far as expanding the campus, Costco's one objective would be to attract and retain quality talent. And we can do that by having a physical plant, a physical presence that really respects its environment, both urban and rural, all at the same time. And we're really trying to create both a productive and an enjoyable work environment. If we do all these things right, I think we will have accomplished our objectives. So a little bit about the development agreement. We really appreciated all of the work that went into it. It did, in effect, streamline the entitlement process. It created a flexible framework for the implementation of the SIDS. It allowed us to grow in place. It densifies in an urban way very thoughtfully. It provided for infrastructure funding that supported this planned growth and intentional densification. And it also had at its core a commitment to sustainability. It was a tremendous mutual benefit for both the city of Issaquah and Costco Wholesale. That would yield us 1.5 million square feet of new commercial area, and it would provide an infrastructure funding mechanism to support this planned growth. And that is the true essence of a partnership. Costco, I sometimes joke that Costco was into sustainability before it was fashionable. And the reason why we do that is because it makes sense. It's not an altruistic approach. It makes sense. It makes economic sense. It makes people sense. I don't know if you know this, but from a corporate point of view, Costco is one of the largest private generators of power. We have well over 100 photovoltaic installations throughout the western United States. I think we generate nearly 10 million kilowatt hours of renewable power a month or a year. Everything from passive daylighting to low water use, tremendous commitment to recycling, greenhouse gas reductions, everything that we do in our supply chain from packaging to recycling is all geared toward extraordinary efficiencies and economy. How that translates into this project is, and we committed to it as a part of Exhibit K in the development agreement, we're going to use less energy. We're going to have a compact development. And as you may know, Costco is probably the #1 participant in the county for its rideshare program, which reduces single occupancy trips. As Jean mentioned earlier, we're targeting a equivalency to LEED Silver. Elements will be included in the design, such as high-efficiency heat recovery, public feedback displays, photovoltaics, high R value, and even a target energy use intensity of about 35 to 40. Just to put that into perspective, when you look at EUIs for building code, excuse me, I think we're looking at ranges that are in the 50 to 60 range. And normal buildings built, say, throughout Seattle over the last 10 years occur into the 50 to 100 range. So our target on this project is in the 35 to 40 range. I mentioned the less water use and water monitoring. We've adopted throughout the chain an APANA system that has individual sub-metering, and we've saved literally millions of gallons of water across the world with the use of this system, and of course commitments to modern multi-stream waste system as well as low VOCs in all of our building products. So sustainability is an important objective to us, and it's definitely going to be a huge aspect to this particular project. So what I'd like to do now is kick it over to Steve, have him talk a little bit about planning, site constraints, and design determinants.
Commissioners, good to be in front of you again. I'm Steve Bullock of MG2. And just want to spend a little bit of time talking about the site. You're somewhat familiar with it, but I want to reiterate some things probably and maybe even show you some things that you didn't realize about it. Do I need to use the arrows? There we go. As you can see by looking at it, both lots are rather irregular in shape, which is never the easiest condition to start with, right? Each lot is bounded by buildings to the north, existing buildings that for now are going to be staying. Each lot has roads on the south side and then in between them, so they're bounded on two sides by roads. And then they're both bounded on their four sides by environmental features, Issaquah Creek to the east and Pickering Pond to the west. And there's views leaving the site in all directions. Even when we get high enough up, there will be views to the north out to Lake Sammamish, which we're excited about potentially being able to achieve, And another thing to look at here is adjacent to Issaquah Creek, and you're all very familiar with it, but it floods from time to time. The red dashed line is identifying the floodplain line. And you'll see the black dashed line to the east of that is actually where our property line is. So here's our actual property line. We are not actually prohibited from building within the floodplain, but there's a whole nother level of reviews and codes that we have to comply with before we can go into that part of our site. We're going to be encroaching slightly, but for the most part, trying to stay out of it. There's a corner of our building, of the east wing of our building that encroaches into it at the south end and a little bit at the north end. And we're going to have to demonstrate a number of different things for city staff to get them to buy off on that to make sure that it's okay. But we are, for the most part, staying out of that floodplain area, but we absolutely do want to take advantage of these views, looking towards Issaquah Creek, looking towards the pond area and what could be a really nice park-like setting there, and then obviously the Issaquah Alps, the mountains to the south, and maybe the lake to the north. When we were kind of doing some just programmatic diagramming of the site, just trying to identify things and talk about them, one of the things that popped out to us, as Gene even mentioned, is that we've got this service area here at the southeast corner of the trading building. We've also got a service area here at the south corner of Building 3. Both of those service areas are off of Lake Drive, and it would be great if we could make them do double duty, have them perform as service areas for each of these new buildings, because they would be back out of the way. And that's also enforced by the fact that the city code, the CIP and SIDS really encourages an urban development, which is characterized by buildings being located out close to the street edge, right? And so having the buildings, which we're symbolizing with the blue circles, being shoved out towards Lake Drive and 62nd gives us an opportunity to have the building area that we need, get it out close to the road, and then we started looking at some places that we might be able to pick up some community spaces and some entry courts, and we kind of carried that on and started doing some conceptual design work. And this plan is a plan that we kind of came up with, and it's one of the early plans that we brought and had a conversation with city staff about. And in this plan, we were trying to start to apply some of the codes that are included in the Central Issaquah Design and Development Standards for being close to the street, for providing active edges. But we were for the first time kind of bringing up the idea that we weren't going to have an office building on the east side of the west side of Lake Drive. After talking things over with Costco, they really felt like we were going to need to add to our parking count for the campus and the way it runs for them, the guests that they have, the employees that they're going to have. And so this is the first time that we shared with the city the idea about having just a fully parking structure on that corner. And the result of that conversation, they gave us a number of different things to be thinking about that we could continue to take back and design on. First being that they felt like the Building 4, which is here on the east side, was, conceivably going to be consistent with the land plan that was approved with the development agreement, but we're going to need to focus on getting that building close to the street, making sure we're complying with the Build 2 line, that we're complying with emphasizing the building corners, that we're creating obvious entry areas, and that there's active spaces on that ground floor. And if that was the case, then we would potentially be able to go through an administrative process there. But for the garage, because that wasn't envisioned in the land plan, that's going to require a full site development permit review with the Development Commission. And then the biggest thing is, at least for us when we were first talking about them, is that we needed to kind of scrap the idea of having parking on the first floor and figure out some different ways to be compliant with the SIDS standards. And we talked quite a bit about the through block connections, about having community spaces, entry plazas, things like that. And ultimately, we get to the plan that's part of our site development permit in front of you now. And now we have a set of buildings that are pulled out to the street in places where we couldn't quite get to the 10-foot. We brought the sidewalk to the face of buildings in most cases to make it feel like the building's right at, it's a zero lot line building, or, it's right up to the street edge because the sidewalk's there. And in places where we have landscaping incorporated in that area, it was used to, landscape and hardscape is used to direct and move people towards main entrances of the buildings, is to shape spaces and create places, and not just throw down some lawn and just call it a 15-foot setback. It's really designed to be something that's purposeful, that's intentional, and is helping direct people around and into and through spaces and into buildings. On the parking garage, we're doing things that that whole first floor has been completely reimagined from what we first submitted to the city, and there's an exhibition on the space on the north wing that is really meant to give Costco the ability for their buyers and their vendors to get together to look at potential products that they may be selling. It's a big enough space that they can almost even outfit it like a mini warehouse if they wanted to do that, and just demonstrate products, look at them, set it all up. We think that it's going to be a space that's in real high demand for them. And then on the south end, to provide an amenity space that currently is envisioned as a fitness center that the employees can use and will be visible right out to the public, and will show some activity and just energy. So there's a number of comments that were just submitted today, and I think maybe we'll wait until after we've heard any other comments that might get raised tonight, and then try to address those all at one point in time. And now I'll turn this over to Shannon Seuss, who has a really fun part of talking about the design of the buildings.
Yeah, I love my job. Hi, everybody. I'm Shannon Seuss. I'm a senior designer at MG2. I've come on this project fairly recently. I'm only about 2 years into it, comparatively to the rest of the group here. But taking into account Jean presented really fantastic backbone to where we're at and what we've come up with and where we've come. I think what we're trying to do is enhance and utilize all the things that we found in the City of Issaquah's design guidelines. We've had meetings with them multiple times about how to break the building down, keep the scale the right size. So what I've done is kind of given you a little bit of background. I kind of wanted to give you a little bit about Costco's needs as well, because these are just some aspects of what they are looking for in their building as well. Things that also direct us when we're shaping and massing a building. Costco, they want to truly value what they are, which is they're efficient, and they have great culture and values for their people. They're smart and intentional. They want spaces that work for them. So some of the new things that we're proposing that Steve brought up, which was this new flex space, is turned into a thing where they had a spot in their campus that they would set up large projects, but by the city asking for some public realm areas on the first floor, we found this great spot in the parking garage to incorporate some of their flexible and intentional needs. They wanted to be flexible for a changing workforce, so we're creating areas that are definitely public realm spaces, and then spaces that they can flex and change for their own needs. Sustainability is always part of our package. We constantly, in everything that we do at MG2, infuse these aspects to it. Costco is also a great workplace, and they have a lot of teaching programs. They have a sustainability group. They have a couple of other groups that they have some conferences. So you'll see on our first floor, we incorporated a auditorium space, which is mainly meant to be a teaching facility where they can break down and have classes and large meeting groups where they can bring back all their managers. Of course, it's always about the human and the partnership with the people. evolutionary in the building facades, the way we treated it. And healthy employees, we adopted a work plan of creating the building in the shape that you saw it. Part of that was because we wanted to daylight the building inside. It was about how the people, so you see the two buildings turning into those shapes, in those two L shapes, and it's also about how we tried to keep the building narrow, keep the light in, keep people's relationships to the trees and the outside as close as possible. So from a design narrative, we just kind of threw this in as, we are rooted in the Northwest. Costco's rooted here in Issaquah. It's very important to them, keeping a presence of their corporate campus. But I think the main line in this is it's a design that infuses the natural surroundings into the workplace building, designing and creating a warm, inviting, and healthy environment. It's about the people and the health and creating spaces that people flow out of the building, function. There's a thing there. Efficiency is part of Costco's goals, so we're trying to be purposeful in what we do. We're not putting things on the first floor or places that don't make any sense, or we don't need them just to be saying, oh, we're putting retail down there. Well, we're not putting retail down there just to put something on the first floor and say it's not activated. We're making them activated spaces. We want to be part of the Northwest and the nature of the space. We sit up against a beautiful river with great trees, and there's this kind of dichotomy of having an urban edge as well as a natural edge. We're going to use that to our advantage in the facade of the building as well. Sensible. We want lasting materials. We want it to look like it's been there for a while. We want it to relate to its site. We want it to relate to the areas it's in and people. It's always about the humans. I think Jean and them all kind of went through this, so it makes my job a little easier. The main things that we really wanted to point out is our first floor is bright, open, and natural. We have active street frontage in terms of what we've placed in those areas. We've put the green parts, those are what we're considering cafes and restaurants. This will activate in the morning and the afternoon and the evening for the employees. The blue zones are meeting and an auditorium space. An interesting fact that there's the new bridge coming across 62nd.
They can't hear you, so you need to stay near the
62nd?
microphone.
Stay in
Yes.
front of the microphone. I like to move. The 62nd bridge comes across, and it's actually quite high. So we have a slope grade, which is the reason why we kind of put the auditorium to that side. The side on the river side is all an open glaze system, which you'll see in the elevations. We also have the through block connection through the middle of the building, and this is why I said the building is intentionally narrow in its width, but lengthwise, what we did is kind of staggered it. In order, with this site being curved, you can't just place the building without kinking it all the way around, so we did an intentional slide and created the 67 West Plaza. Like we said before, level 4, we created a sky bridge across the building, and it's called a sky bridge through the middle piece. So we're trying to keep the building as one building, but because it's longer, it's 630-something feet, we can't have one continuous long line, so we broke the building into two parts. It also affects the elevation as well. The high-level bridge is actually 30 feet off the ground at its highest point, so it feels very grand. You're not going to feel like you're being squished when you're walking through it. And the sky bridge connector to the other side is mainly for the employees to come across from the parking garage with minimal impact of them crossing streets and involving them with pedestrians. We put it in at level 4, which actually puts that bridge in at about 40 feet above the road line. So it's way high, and the whole purpose for that is to keep the views of the mountains. That was very intentional, as well as it comes in at the middle of the building. The building's 9 stories. We come in at the middle. We're doing active cores as part of the keeping the employees active, and the employees currently will run the stairs of the parking garage next door. they go out there as part of their exercise program. So we intentionally did 2 feature grand stairs in the building to emphasize that, but we put the entrance at 4 so that they go up and down. It kind of encourages them to do that over elevators. Level 9, we're just showing that part of the building tripartite system is to step the building in. So level 9 actually squishes on all sides, and then we broke it at the open rooftop terrace in the middle to intentionally come across as that we have 2 different buildings, not one large building. And then for level 5, this is where we had the most fun with, normally we were saying we just wanted to put a parking garage in, but because we want to have an active front, we found functions in Costco's program that made us have the ability to create spaces that activated the front street lines, gave reason why we had plazas. So the front piece is the fitness center, and there's an active plaza to the front that spills out to it. And then the active street frontage on the top, where we've connected that north plaza in between Building 3. We intentionally were trying not to block too many of the views from Building 3, create a plaza area that they would spill out to, but give Costco a reason why they could use that whole entire first floor, not for parking, but as a public space. And then at the top of the building, we, as Jean showed you, we're providing PV panels. Part of the interesting design part is that we're using a speed ramp to get up at the first floor. So we are able to do a high level 17, 18-foot floor line, and then we go flat deck from there with intermediate ramps. So it kind of creates more of an office building or a flat plane across the frontage. We didn't want to have a lot of sloping, ramping systems going around. So the building at the top of the north is all flat. So it'll intentionally look from the elevation as a building. Part of the materials is we wanted to point out that we're trying to be contextual with what's existing on the campus. So you're looking at mainly our newest building on the campus, which is Building 3. It's the one that sits closest to Building 5 in the parking lot. You can see that it has brick facade, metal awnings, punched windows. So these are a lot of the features that we were trying to incorporate when we got to the new building. The new building, though, is 9 stories. This is 3 stories. So in order to do these feats and not have it look a little awkward, we changed the scale or the materials in certain areas, but we kept the intention of what this building looks and what 1 and 2 look like next to it. And then these are just some materials, just to give you an idea that brick was very important. So we used brick at the baseline for people. We're using some vertical slat kind of elements on the parking garage. We have some patterned glass awnings. So everywhere around the building, there's an awning system to keep people protected when they're walking. We're using a curtain wall system for our main body. We've worked intensively with Rushing in terms of how to do the energy for this. It is actually going to be a triple paned building, which is not rare or new. It's actually been done in Europe for many, many years, but not as frequent in the Pacific Northwest yet. It's on its way with the new building codes. And then we're doing some wood soffits to warm it up and some pattern features. So this is kind of our first, I guess you call it, or wow shot. Mainly what we're trying to show here is we are going to have this tripartite building. We are stepping it back. We're trying to articulate the urban side with multiple, 3 different types of languages. As Jean proposed, we have the bookends, we have the lanterns, we have glass, we have the step back at the top, and this great opportunity where we will be able to have views from the rooftop out to Lake Sammamish, to the mountains, to the lake, and to the ponds. I think another intentional thing hasn't been discussed yet is the parking garage. Not only are we adding curtain wall glazing to the corners to mimic the lantern effect that's occurring on the office building, we intentionally brought the scale down by lowering the floor-to-floor heights because it is a parking garage. We don't need as much height in it. So you can definitely see how the parking garage has dropped as it goes across the site. The building's intentional to look like it's connected or part of the same family, but of course, it's two different functions. This is looking from the view coming down on 62nd. And I'm just kind of using the 3D views to kind of give you a sense of what we were looking for. We have the bookends, which will be done in a metal. The baseline is, or the first level of the tripartite is the brick, which you saw in the one view that Jean showed. It's bringing the scale down in that portion of the building. Because it's set on the property line as part of the street frontage, a 9-story building right up against the street line tends to be fairly opposing. So we used the brick to the second or third level. We also did kind of this white pattern, textured panels, and what we're showing there is that we're actually spanning 2 levels per floor. So it's kind of a trick of breaking the building down and give you the sense of it's only a 3-story, but it's not, but you know. And then setting the back line and having roof overhangs. So that was the urban edge. So you saw it was a little more solid on that side. This side is our Creekside Terrace view. It's on the nature side. This side we're intentionally opening up and using mostly glass, other than a little bit of the white textured panels. We want to reflect the nature, and we want to have the most open views to nature on this side, and this is the kind of opposite of the urban edge because of where it sits. Through the through-block piece, you can see that it's a 30-foot high open to the floor, so we're actually coming in at level 3 on that, and then it goes only a few floors up from there. The brick facade, we have the metal panels for the expression of punched openings. That kind of brings back that punched opening from building 3 and other buildings in the area, but we're using a different material type instead of brick at the high level. Trying to lighten the building as it goes up as opposed to doing a 9-story brick building, which we felt had this heavy quality instead of a lighter, more modern, efficient building. As we come around, we're coming across the front of the 90, and at the apex of where Lake Drive and 62nd, you're looking at on the far right side, the lantern to the parking garage and the high level of the Sky Bridge. So Sky Bridge is 40 feet from road deck to underside. It's quite high, which turns into a structural challenge in itself, but the intention was so that we would see through it and not have it as a blocking mechanism. As you come across the front of the building, now you're seeing a little bit more of the parking garage. This is the fitness center in the lower portion, 2-story volume glass. We're doing a mezzanine. We're kind of taking advantage of the front of the parking to have a plaza. We're using the bookend metal panels with open punching. And then you can see the slats is probably a metal slat that's going 2 levels up with screening. We've added a concrete line to mimic that 2-level apartheid aspect. And then that's the drive-through on the one side. This is coming down Lake Place. You're looking at the corner of the parking garage. This lower piece is, like we said, is trying to lower the scale for the people. It gives this 2-story volume effect to the function flex space. This is where they're going to use it for everything from product displays to gathering events. It spills out into the plaza, so we're encouraging walking from the 2 buildings down the side. We did intentionally use the brick all the way up. It sits right next to the building 3. It will be very complementary to the building, as well as you see the back panels. The slats ride through, so that's kind of a one element. And then there's a back panel inside. There's these lines that are behind the screen Those are intentionally used to block the light of cars at night. So we will have a consistent light glow from the building without having these light bleed outs from cars driving through. And then off to the far side, you can kind of see how that one lantern starts to connect the office building. And then we come to the end, and really what the building is about when we talk about connection to the existing campus. This is kind of the view of the trading building as the kind of ghosted one on the side. You're coming down Lake Place. You kind of have this warm glow at night of the flex space and the parking garage. But intentionally, what we really want people to kind of see as they come around the corner, the way this road turns, is the lantern to the entry, which is the main entrance to the building, the warm glow of the plaza, how the building kind of tucks and steps around and creates this kind of capturing moment, and you can kind of see through, and you see the mountains and beyond. So the focal points, the lantern edges, and the vistas to the mountains, emphasizing the curves. With that, I just wanted to thank you all for your time. We have everyone here available for questions. I hopefully gave you enough insight into some of the design aspects as we move forward.
Thank you very much. That's been really a couple of great presentations. And so I think at this point, the best thing to do would be to open the opportunity for any members of the public that wish to speak to speak. And then I'd recommend we probably take a 5-minute break just to stand up and get blood circulating again. I know I could use it. So how about, are there members of the public that wish to speak? And if you would wish to speak, I'd appreciate you signing in, and then when you go to talk, if you would tell us your name. And
David Kapler. Speaking as an individual tonight, and then as Issaquah Alps Trails Club Vice President for Advocacy. I'll start with that. I sent late this afternoon a letter. Did the commissioners get that? Yeah. Great. Okay, so that just stressing the retention of trees, especially on parcel 4. The trail there is really, it is part of the transportation system, but the people that are really traveling north-south as a transportation trail will be using the East Lake Sammamish Trail, which has been closed for a long time, especially when Sammamish eventually lets the county finish the trail to the north and gets it paved. The serious bicyclists that are going over I-90 up to Kenmore and further and then back around, making the big loop, and others that are even just going to Redmond are going to be on that. So there will still be bikes on that trail. But it's definitely, and you see it now already, there's a lot of badges, people with badges walking that trail. They're not trying to get somewhere else on the campus necessarily of Costco. They are just enjoying walking on that trail, which has got quite a few nice trees growing. I do make a pitch about the concerns about cottonwood trees or other trees that end up wrecking the pavement, causing tripping hazards and costs. And cottonwood trees, not everybody agrees with me, but having seen a very large branch come off of a cottonwood tree for no apparent reason is, and I know it's an issue out there. They are not a tree that we need to encourage there, but we do want to have native trees. We also have to recognize the watering needs and the rest of trees and climate change. I know the Mountain Sound Greenway is looking at reforestation restoration projects, and they're thinking more about trees that are more friendly to existing climate in Oregon, Western Oregon, than Western Washington. And that's just, anyway, we want to have trees that do not require high maintenance, cause problems, or require lots of water once they're established. The, back over on the parking garage area, that trail there, which is on the south end of the ponds, on the east side of the pond, has been covered with water drainage forever. I thought when Costco bought the site from the original owners there, they might fix that, but it's still, at least the last time I was there, it's a terrible situation with wet water coming over the trail, of course, if when the winter, even more with that. So hopefully there's going to be some drainage improvements that are tied in with the parking garage, but we're also going to lose potential vegetation when they do the solving the problem, hopefully, of the water across the trail. So hopefully that's going to be thought out and make that trail a much more usable and safer part of our recreational trail system, as well as part of the intra-campus transportation system. The lantern on Building 4, one of them looked like it was at the northeast corner of that building, or the very eastern part of the building at the north. That seems like it's closer to the trail and the woods and the open space over there. Maybe I didn't understand the drawing. The sky bridges, I hope they're going to figure out a way so they ventilate them and not, because they're going to be, there's going to be huge heat. Just the poor little crummy greenhouse I have with the door open this summer was unbearably hot, and just and those sky bridges are just, which is cool that they're all glass, but they are a greenhouse, and hope they figure out to have a lot of natural venting of those just to make them more comfortable and not be requiring lots of energy to cool them down or deal with that hot air coming into the buildings. Back from my earlier days on the council, we dealt with Costco on the recycling issue, and what happens at the back end of the store, the warehouse store, I think is very good, but the general public that interfaces with Costco at the food court would have no idea that they're actually quite good at recycling overall, but I would hope they could get that as part of this whole thing and making sure that the recycling is really obvious to visitors to the building and to employees. Putting on just a citizen hat, not Issaquah Alps Trails Club, and that is perhaps you've already received some information about the concern we all have, and especially residents south of town have, about the 55,000 yards of material that could be exported from this site. That's 5,000, regular dump truck loads. There's also going to be material brought in, apparently, to some degree, because some of the site they'll need better material. Personally, living a little more than a block that way, and my brother having a building on East Sunset, I've benefited tremendously by the city banning the trucks from Newport, Front Street, and East Sunset. But when we've done that, we are really putting a huge burden on the rural residents south of town, especially on May Valley Road. It's a crazy road as it is, connecting Hobart-Issaquah Road and 900, and we do not need to be sending more trucks full of dirt speeding on that road. There has been an agreement on the Bergsma so far that they will use I-90 and have some other way of dealing with their 80,000 potential cubic yards of material, excess material from their site. Thank you for the opportunity.
Good evening. I'm Hart Sugarman. I'm a resident of Issaquah for 23 years, and I've jotted down some notes as I watched the presentation this evening. Issaquah has experienced unprecedented growth over the past several years due to all the development that has taken place. Traffic has a big impact on the community. One intersection that needs to be addressed sooner than later is the intersection of 17th Avenue and 12th Avenue with the Holiday Inn located at the southeast corner. My specific request is to add a right turn only lane from northbound 17th Avenue to enter 12th Avenue to facilitate the ingress. Many of you might know that intersection as you approach the City Hall Northwest. As shown in tonight's slide, the ratio of parking stalls per 1,000 is decreasing. This is a concern. The city and the state should also look at constructing a bridge across I-90 connecting Lake Drive on the north to Maple Avenue on the south side. This will significantly assist with the current traffic congestion experienced on East Lake Sammamish, Northwest Sammamish Road, and 17th Avenue. My last item is related to community. In this slide presentation tonight, we see a community pass-through area whereby residents can walk through the new Costco development from the east to the west or vice versa. However, today, if I'm walking or biking along the trail of the creek, I cannot get over to Lake Drive. There are signs posted that say no trespassing, and I think Costco should allow someone to be able to pass through the property today as a community goodwill. One suggestion for the architects and Costco for the new construction, maybe it's already been considered, I might have missed this point, but to put in a rooftop terrace on top of this buildings to allow the employees of Costco to have their lunch, coffee breaks, or just relaxation time. The views from that area, the vistas are stunning. It's a spectacular view from that height. So I think that'd be a really nice advantage for the employees. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Connie Marsh. I live on Squawk. So Costco is sustainable except for in the environment in which they're building. They are using potentially reasonable building techniques, but they're filling the floodplain and they don't even want to replant the trees that they're taking out. So it is hard for me to fathom that you can say you're trying to emulate the nature of the Pacific Northwest when you're beating the bejesus out of this parcel. When you're looking at the impacts to Pickering Creek, I fail to understand why they need to fill the floodplain. And then we have a secondary note. Special flood hazard areas are a part of our critical areas chapter, and they're a part of SEPA, and I do not believe that they are in the planned action ordinance, and this means SEPA does not suffice, and you would need to have a SEPA decision on the flood hazard. Now, it might just be a condition saying that they must apply with Chapter 16 that deals with flood hazard areas, but you can't make a decision until your SEPA is completed. And I don't know how that we can understand how that building is going to be put in place without knowing what they're going to have to do to provide the compensatory detention that you need when you fill in a flood hazard area. And it's just missing. That flood hazard area fill is a large part of the reason that they want to take all the trees out adjacent to the Pickering Trail, leaving Pickering Trail reasonably denuded. The overlook that they're talking about from their building is raised up, so it doesn't interface with the trail. So, and I'm going to repeat this for both buildings. Well, the people who are working at Costco are gonna be happy as clams, because who wouldn't? They get all the benefits. The people who live in the town and walk Pickering Trail are losing. And that is not a part of the Central Issaquah plan. It is supposed to be augmenting the community features too. And we all know that Costco is not open for the public. It's a condition in their development agreement. So these areas that they're talking about to be community open spaces are not for you and I. That is for their workers. So I think we need a little balance there. I think we need the trees to be either taken away and then put back against Pickering, or just leave them how they are. Certainly, the condition should not be to give the ability to put money into a tree fund so that those trees could be planted elsewhere. I asked about the tree fund. They do not seem to track the tree fund by location. And even though the Central Issaquah plan says that those trees would need to be planted in the Central Issaquah area, we don't have a mechanism to do so. So now I'm going to skip over to the other side, and it's basically the same conversation. You have the community trail that goes around the Pickering Pond, and right now it's sort of a gentle slant with trees, and you walk around that corner, and yes, you may slip, but you are in nature. And then you go up a little bit, and there's a bit of a retaining wall. If you look at their plans, they are putting a retaining wall up and more fill. They're basically putting the trail into an armpit of more shadow. And yes, it is delightful from up on top of that retaining wall. If you work for Costco, you get to look at the people down there in the armpit, and you get to look at the ponds. But the Central Issaquah area is for all of us, and you cannot allow a development to impact a community benefit like the Pickering Pond Trail. And so, if a condition was added saying that the Pickering Pond Trail needed to be improved and made better for the community, even as they fill or do what they need to do, I don't have too much of a problem with them doing whatever they want to do. I'm not a fan of the buildings, gotta say. But you can see the environmental side I'm coming from here. You don't need to clear it that much. I don't understand the filling and why they need to move that much dirt, and don't impact the two trails on either end. For goodness sake, you're Costco. You can do it. You can make the town better and your company better. You just have to take that next step. Thank you.
Any other members of the public wish to speak? So we'll close the public portion of this, public open. We'll close the public hearing part of this, or the public.
Just the public comment.
Public comment period. And I would suggest we take a break until 9 o'clock. So kick back.
All right. Good job.
Okay, I think we're back on air, and I would encourage everybody, welcome you back. And we'll start the session. I'd like to have the commissioners address their comments on Building 4, or their questions first, and then comments on Building 4. And then we'll do questions and comments on Building 5. So starting with Building 4, questions first of commissioners.
Chairman, I have a question.
Great.
This may apply to both buildings. We have a geotechnical study for the site, and it noted the soils on the site are subject to liquefaction during seismic events. In the SEPA checklist, I think it stated the buildings will be supported by a pile foundation system, but I'm wondering about the sky bridge. Do we have any special concerns for safety regarding that sky bridge? And are we confident that any of the standards and requirements that we reference in our document here sufficiently apply to sky bridges in that case?
Are you looking for us to answer that? We'd be happy to. We're going to be.
Please introduce yourself first.
I'm sorry, Steve Bullock with MG2. Thanks. We have a structural engineer as part of our team, and they've already been looking at this, and they will have to submit substantial justification with the building department as we go through the permitting process. At this point in time, the sky bridge is not going to have any column supports going down to the ground. It's going to be fully supported by the buildings. It's going to have a sliding connection. I'm sorry, which building is the sliding? On the office side, so it's going to be fixed on the garage side, which is a concrete building, and the end that projects into the office building will slide to accommodate the difference of movement between them. But everything we're hearing from our structural engineer so far is that it's going to be acceptable, and that's including the concerns with liquefaction.
Okay, thank you. Another one. I'd like to say it's really encouraging to see the number of sustainability features that are built into the plan. A couple of comments or questions, minor ones related to that. The trellises on top, will any of that be planted and vegetated, going for a little green roof there, or is that for solar cell only?
Right now, it's just for solar cell and aesthetic purposes only. No plans to introduce any greenery on the roof for the parking garage.
Hi, Jackie Frank. I was just going to qualify that. That's correct. The trellis and photovoltaic will be for the garage, but we do have, and we can pull up the roof plan again for the office building. There's quite a bit of a potential landscape area at the top, rooftop area.
Great. Another related question: are any of the windows, I guess this is the right building, right? In Building 4 going to be operable, or is that all sealed window? Think about a little healthy building aspect there.
Right, they're all sealed windows. We've had a number of conversations related to that with our MEP sustainability expert, and we're considering having some operable windows. Some of the difficulties that we have with it is I-90 to the south is a huge noise generator. And just the climate that we're in, and the mechanical system that we're proposing will have better modulation of the whole building by having them be completely fixed.
And just one final one, if I may. The Google Earth renditions on sheets 40 and 41, in some of those, the buildings appear pretty stark black, unlike some of the other renditions, the architectural renditions. Was that just kind of a convention of the Google Earth illustrations, and do you expect the colors of those triple pane windows to be lighter?
So you're referring to these images right here, correct?
Right.
And a lot of that is because we don't have a lot of control in the Google Earth model. We're able to create a model and drop it in, but then they start rendering what some of the materials look like, and we don't have control at that point. So it is much darker than we expected
Oh,
to be.
that was the case, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Other commissioners?
Well, this is one he asked about.
So a question about the through-block passage that moves between the trading building and Building 4. And there's a condition that is included in the staff's recommendations here, Condition 3, that talks about prioritization of the pedestrians and putting in place some kind of traffic calming or things that provide a kind of a safer environment for pedestrians. Have you given thought to how you're going to accomplish that? Because that's a fairly large space that you're going to cross that's active with large vehicles.
Are you talking about this side?
Other side, Building 4.
You're
right?
talking
had
about
that-
this by
yes,
trading.
that through-block
Right.
passage.
And so one of the things that I guess I'd like to give you a little bit of background with is the photo that you saw earlier of the trading building loading dock. You saw that those were garage doors, right? And normally what happens there is the garage doors open and the trucks actually drive inside the building and the garage doors close. They don't sit out there in that loading dock. The loading actually happens inside the building. And so we're considering a number of different things for signing, striping, using different material, whatever it is, to emphasize the pedestrian crossing in that zone. We haven't, gotten to a final solution on that.
Is that's a trail connection when you
Yes.
come back across, that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay. So the trucks that are accessing that building, are they full tractor trailer?
No.
Or are they smaller
Those
delivery
are
vans?
step vans.
Okay.
Full tractor trailer. There's a separate loading dock over here on this side of the building, but the ones that are here are smaller step vans, not trailers.
Okay. That helps too. Okay.
I think everything I've heard is 1 to 2 trips a day at the south end.
So it's not a high-traffic area
Right.
then? Thank you. That helps.
That's a follow-up question. If you don't mind, this would go into Building 5, but since we're talking about that, excuse me, the east-west
Yeah.
cross-through, your thoughts on the staff suggestion about moving that from the north to the south side of the underbuilding? And because I think staff was recognizing there's problems either way.
Yeah, and, I don't know that we want to get in a big fight about it. We had a discussion. We thought it was better on the north side because it got you past most of the traffic before you crossed over. At the same time, if you're on the south side, you might have to cross more traffic, being the cars that are entering into the parking garage ramp, but then you are avoiding the driveway where the trucks are driving. It can go either way. And we're okay with the condition as they have it written right now.
Jackie, Frank, Lucy and Jean and I met about this recently, and the way the condition is written, we intend to have a sidewalk on both sides, the north and the south side, but the intention is to make the southerly one slightly wider.
Yeah. Thanks.
Other questions on Building 4?
I'll jump in. The question on one of my big concerns is that blank wall, the southeast corner of Building 4. But you mentioned that the elevation difference with the roadway and the sidewalk, but I
Right.
haven't seen anything where I can identify exactly what that elevation difference is. Do you have anything that would show that, or do we know what that number is?
I do. This is a grading plan. So the finished floor of this building is set at 64. And here you see on this sidewalk and catch basin at 69. So at this point, let's see here. I don't know, is that the rim of the catch basin? That's the sidewalk elevation. That's the sidewalk elevation. So we're 5 feet above it. The sidewalk is 5 feet above the finished floor of the building right here.
And then how far is that sidewalk from that corner? Is it as close as you're showing right there?
It is. That's 5 feet. Yeah. The build to line says we're supposed to be within 10 feet.
All right. Okay. A question, I guess, for staff, speaking of that same corner. The section 11.2.e talks about a sense of arrival. And in the staff report, there's a discussion about a sense of arrival with the lanterns between buildings 4 and 5. But it seems like there's going to be a huge number of people coming from the east and from the south that are going to, their arrival into this district, which is the way it's worded, is once you come across 62nd and this is the first point you would come into the urban core district, that will be the sense of arrival right there. And I don't really see anything that talks about or indicates sense of arrival at this location. Wondered about your thoughts on that. Not both the blank wall issue that you've addressed, but also
I'll start. The blank wall will be buried 5 feet down, so I think that does help. And we have talked that with Costco that the way that is shown in the plans is kind of a preliminary. I mean, they recognize that those walls needed further attention and agree that that was a planned refinement. I think that the question of arrival is, you're right, that corner needs, at every corner that's sort of exposed, present, needs to be detailed and visually strong. But I'm not sure that necessarily the roundabout isn't the arrival point. It's the edge of something can be the arrival point, or it could be the intersection. So I think they have chosen a different arrival point.
the pre-arrival point then.
I don't know if you have something either of you would like to add.
Well, I think both Shannon and I want to address it a little bit too. First of all, on the blank wall, we're still at a point where we felt like we needed to get some kind of feedback from you guys that we're going in the right direction. So we haven't gotten to our end game as far as the design, and especially with the brickwork. We plan to have soldier coursing, reveal lines. Plan to build things into to make it interesting, not have it just be a solid blank field of brick all running bond, no change to that. So I think that there are going to be things in that wall that give it additional detail, that give it additional interest, that help address some of the concerns. Shannon wanted to talk about the sense of arrival, I believe.
Shannon Susican. Yeah, we did talk about the wall also adding a planter that kind of raises it. So we're already coming up 5 feet and then adding another level of landscape. So we're minimizing that just dead wall back there. And I think I wanted to point out that coming across the bridge, we've done fly-throughs, which we plan to show at the next meeting because there's a lot of entourage that goes into making it look right on all sides. But when you come across the bridge here, this is actually a lantern corner here. So we are kind of addressing this corner as being a lantern, but treating this corner as kind of a way of
You have to be near the
identifying-
microphone.
You come around the corner with that that metal wall piece, the bookend, is actually helping kind of direct you around the corner as you come across this bridge.
Well, can you talk more about when you say that's going to be a lantern corner?
Well, we're kind of
I
treating...
understood with the others where there's sort of a column like a staircase or something, but I'm not sure I understand on this corner.
Well, we're treating kind of the corners that are focal points from certain vantage points. So we see, as you come across this bridge, that the first thing you see across that bridge is kind of this end piece and that lantern. We call it a lantern effect mainly because what we put inside the space, we're planning on it being like a meeting room or something that we can actually control the light and keep a constant level. Now, we can dim the lights. We've talked to our lighting designers about which type of light, how do we light it. It can be a consistent light source. You know, most office buildings at 5 o'clock are going to go fairly dark and dim, so we're kind of planning lighting on the building from the outside to kind of uplight it in certain areas, and then have these kind of focal points at the corners as corner emphasis. Here at the main entry, and then the corner at the roundabout. There's the 4 main locations where we kind of will maintain a consistent lighting system at night.
Thank you.
Calling
So,
it a lantern.
in looking at the language, which always helps, I think that one of the things to consider is that the building may not be the point of arrival as much as crossing the bridge, because the bridge is, has some nice details and sort of syncopation as you go across it, and then you're coming across the bridge and arriving in the district. So while I'm not saying that the building isn't a part of that, I think the question may be about the elements between that are happening along with the building, between the building and the bridge, that give that sense of arrival. And I would say that I don't know exactly what those are right now, so I need to spend some time. I think we need to go back and look at that relative to that piece of code you identified.
Great. Thank you. And it sounds like you're looking at it too, because and for a lot of people, it's going to be a big building, and you're going to drive on, and people are saying, wow, that's the Costco headquarters. That'll be their view of it right there. You see, so. If you don't mind me, keep going to.
Keep going.
The question on the build to line for building 4. So, because when we were doing the Costco master site plan, the build to line, when the road was curvilinear, was quite the issue in trying to maintain the view of the mountains, and I'm glad it got straightened out and does have a great view. And I know that it's written such that the buildings don't have to be curved to meet a curvilinear street, but everything I read in the code says it's supposed to be a build-to line, if it can be. And when I look at the east half of Building 4 that's set back quite a ways at an angle, it could very easily be moved up to be closer to the build-to line. And I think the requirements, I think you need to be, let's see, 11, build to the, it's 11.0, I'm not sure if it's 11.0, but the minimum building frontage, though sufficient length of building shall be present at the build-to line, minimum building frontage shall be at least 75% in the urban core. So when I look at Building 4, if I do just Lake Drive, or if I do just 62nd, I get 38% in the Build 2. If I include Lake Drive and do both streets, I get 53% Build 2. So I think, well, it seems like we're saying the Build 2 line is important, and we have a minimum of 75% Build 2, but then we've designed a building that's not meeting that requirement. And I can see the idea of creating the plaza as a nice feature. I'm trying to wrap my head around, we have a requirement in SIDS that states that you're supposed to do this, and it doesn't look to me like we're prevented from doing that. When I look at the bottom picture there, Building 4, it seems like it could be moved down, and I don't know if it's a question for the architect or for staff, I guess, is how do we accept that and say it's okay?
Well, I think that one thing we can do is go through and provide a more detailed, fine-grained evaluation against the interpretation and the elements that are identified. Because I do think that even though the streets are straighter, they are not exactly straight. However, I think the other piece to identify from Chapter 11 relative to the 75% is that community spaces reduce the percentage, and using alternative frontage elements reduces the percentage. And
From the 75% or just
from the
100?
75%.
Okay.
And I think those, I'm doing this from memory, but I believe it gets it down to around 45%. And so they did indicate, if you look on page 11 of the packet, they did indicate that where the building is set back, they are doing community space and alternative building elements. So I think it is meeting the intent, but I think it's worthwhile, as you've identified that, to do a more fine-grained evaluation relative to what's in Exhibit J.
Okay, great. And my intent is, I think it looks attractive. I think that'd be a nice plaza to have out there and have that space. I just want to make sure that we're not doing something that just because we think it looks nice.
And I appreciate you bringing that up, and I was just looking in the code just to confirm things, and on page 11, as Lucy recommended. But item I says that the required build, 75% can be reduced by 10% for community spaces, and item J, alternative building frontage, lets you reduce it another 20% down to 45%, like Lucy said. And on page 11, we've documented up in the top right-hand corner how we believe we're complying with that requirement by doing the math on that.
I'm sorry, page 11 of,
It looks like this in your packet. It's a black and white site plan with some red
Not of the staff report, but the actual
report.
drawings.
Oh, the drawings.
of the package that we submitted. Sorry. Yes.
The development agreement also addresses the setback, the build-to line, specifically where, due to existing curvilinear streets, property lines, block length, and secure nature of the Costco buildings, it is not possible to meet the strict letter of the standards. Site plans will locate buildings to create street wall to the extent practical or reasonable without forcing the buildings to be curved. When we faced this dilemma, we came in with our tracing paper with Keith and with Lucy, and we sat down and said, you got to help us address this, because before we freeze a site plan, we're going to have to, this is a huge issue. And what we have is a kind of a diminishing return. If you were to slide, the more you slide this building forward and try and keep the planes parallel, this building gets shorter and shorter and shorter, which certainly...
Can't hear you.
The building gets shorter and shorter as you slide the building forward. The critical setback, if you will, is that point. So we didn't want to rotate it around that building and get everything out of square, because then you wouldn't meet the build-to line on the other side. So we picked a side. We picked a parallel. The road is still curvilinear, although it's straighter than it used to be. Well, actually, the road didn't exist. But what we found was this is as regular as we can get without being curvilinear, and still kind of maximizing or minimizing the build-to, if you will. And so basically we were frozen. And so I asked Keith, I asked Lucy, are we all in agreement with this strategy? Because this is it. We don't have a project if we can't obtain the square footage we're looking for and try and really minimize the amount of setback, which is everybody's intent. So that was the dilemma we were faced.
Sure, and I apologize, I hadn't read the notes up on the upper right-hand corner of your page 11, so I should have read through that before to...
There's a lot of detail in the stuff you gave us.
There is.
So can I, just a quick follow-up to
Absolutely.
Commissioner Morgan? So because I was thinking about the same thing and about that East Plaza, and so if we're not pulling the building forward, creating that kind of that urban edge, how do you accomplish that with the plaza? What's that urban experience going to be like? And I know you're still early, but I think that's going to be part of the, kind of an important part of how you accommodate, what the city is trying to accomplish with the design standards.
Right, and as Shannon mentioned a bit ago, we're going to be working with raised planting beds, probably varying heights. As we work into that area, there's a possibility that we would be using street trees. You may, when you look at that, there's a pullout that got introduced here, a drop-off for pedestrians, which is eliminating the street trees that are out on the curb line. Well, we're going to be introducing those back into our site plan, and maybe they run along where that needs to be to create the street wall. There's a number of different things that we're still kind of thinking about related to that.
Yeah, but I think that'll be kind of an important kind of interface
Yep.
For the pedestrians particularly.
You might also just, the code, the alternative building frontage, there are elements listed like pergolas, arcades, arbors, trellises. So it's more than just street trees. It's actual vertical architectural elements that would be appropriate, but help kind of stand in for the street wall.
I guess another question on SIDS 11.3A, pedestrian connections, says pedestrian facility connection shall be convenient with generally no further than 250 feet of separation when a block length exceeds 300 feet. So there's a lot of discussion about the 300-foot maximum. But I'm just curious on this reading where it says the no further than 250 feet separation of pedestrian connection. So looking, I guess, at the south end of the east half of Building 4, but I'm not sure what that distance is. Does that have to be less than 250 feet then?
So if I may chime in, Jean Lynn, City of Issaquah. So on sheet 11 of the project plans, there are some dimensions that are provided along that stretch of the building. I'm going to call it the east wing. And so there's a couple of dimensions here that are worth noting. One is if you start from the very eastern corner of the building working west, you've got a 31-foot build-to line. Then you have a 288-foot community and alternative building frontage. And that 288 feet incorporates pretty much the bulk of that building facade, as well as the through block passage area. If you're looking proportionately at the through block passage area, it's roughly maybe 2 times the width of that 31-foot build-to line area. Does that make sense?
About 60.
So it would be approximately 250 feet. I don't know the exact dimensions, but it would be approximately 250 feet before you come across a pedestrian path to get you through the block.
Yeah, well, I guess that maybe an architect could chime in too, because maybe you've got that dimension somewhere from the southeast corner Building 4 to the pedestrian connection.
Well, and the way I need to look at the code too. I mean, I think Gene nailed it. We're showing on there 288 feet, and I bet you it's less than 250.
Yeah, that's, I had the 31, the 288, and I was trying to, but I didn't have the dimension of the pedestrian opening to try to get to that number.
So the other piece I would add is that on the Costco campus, it is the because a lot of the traffic will be the employees, the ability to go through the building counts as well as kind of an alternating pattern of a trail that's outside, then a path through the building. And so if you look
That
on
would-
page 10 of the drawing packet,
Right, so that pass-through would count?
yeah,
It becomes a moot point
yeah.
then? Okay,
Sorry, brain's
Okay.
slow to click in.
thank you.
There's another section of the SIDS that also says that buildings can be up to 300 feet long before they're required to have that break. And in the development agreement, it specifically calls it out. Which section is this? Yeah, that's what I said. Incrementally build a connected pedestrian system between Lake Drive and the shared use routes behind the buildings, Pickering Trail and Pickering Pond Trail, consistent with the intent of SIDS, section 6.2A. If buildings are longer than 300 feet, open-air arcades enclosed through building atriums or other elements that serve a similar purpose will be provided. And I believe that language comes from SIDS as well, 6.2.
Well, hopefully, if that through block through the building counts, then we don't have to worry about it, so.
Well, I think showing you some of the diagrams that were in the original SDP, along with the layout, will sort of help. So we'll show you some pictures.
Yeah, and in SIDS 6.0.2, block length, says where block length exceeds 300 feet, additional circulation facilities are to be provided. We know we're within 300 feet.
Yeah, I was just looking, what jumped out to me was 11.3A, where it talks about every 250. There's another question on, so 14, from the building standards in 14.3, 14.3A1, for all uses, setback buildings with heights over 3 stories through changes in building materials, articulation, and modulation that differs from the first 3 floors. So it's, I guess a question, it says setback, it says through modulation, things like that, but these buildings aren't set back, obviously. Is the intent here to, I guess I'm reading that and I'm trying to figure out, okay, was this written to say, okay, you go up 3 floors, and when you see the example they show in it, it's a building that steps back after 3 floors. Can the buildings be compliant with this when there's no setback at all?
I would say yes, based on the material that buildings can use material changes to accomplish that, not just physical setbacks.
Okay.
And we have stepped back the top floor.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
More questions on Building 4?
I have one more broader question, and I was thinking about it, and then we had one of the public speakers kind of speak to the question about kind of the employee experience and then also the public experience with respect to this development. I think it's going to be a wonderful environment for the employees of looking at the design work and the thought and the detail and the spaces that you're creating. I think it's the challenge of everybody these days to make sure that you're attracting and retaining the highest quality staff you can find. But it is about and I don't recall how the development agreement deals with the public access or not to any of these public spaces, particularly those that are adjacent to the streets and/or the through passage to get to public trails from the street? And is that open and accessible to the general public, or is this a closed campus?
Hi, Jackie Frank. Every time I go walking out, I run into Keith. I mean, like every time. So
I thought he was supposed to work for a week.
it's always out there. No, the public trails along the pond and along the creek side, the public use it quite well and quite frequently. Access is there. We're not proposing anything that would preclude access as currently exists. If anything, we're trying to design a complementary solution that would allow coexistence of both the public and the private property. I do direct you to the development agreement as it relates to community space. And I quote, through this development agreement, Costco and the city have worked to balance Costco's need to provide safe and inviting workplace with implementing the CIP and SIDS, and making a positive contribution to the public realm. As clarification to both the definitions of public realm and community spaces in the SIDS, quote, required community spaces on Costco's property are privately owned, and the use of Costco's property is intended for employees, vendors, invited guests, and visitors. No, quote, significant community spaces are located within the Costco property, though they are located on some of the parcels within the expansion area. So, our intention is to not do anything that would preclude the public trail systems that surround the property, but let's point out, this is private property as well. So both can coexist.
So I guess is 4 and 5. The bike parking question, that there were 63 required, 60 provided. I presume you can figure out 3 more. But the staff report said 25% would have to be in building 4, and I think that was due to section 15 or whatever that talked about parking should be near. I guess 2 questions. One is that bike parking for people throughout the campus, so it's not just building 4, but also could be close to other buildings. And then I was curious where the staff got the 25% number. I didn't see a source for why 25%, not 50, not 75, and so forth. Any other thoughts on the bike parking?
If we could explain maybe some of our thought process for why we were proposing it all in the garage. And we're okay with the condition. We're going to comply with the condition too. But our original thought was employees of Costco are coming to work here all day. If they're avid bicyclists and they're riding their bike, they're probably going to want to hop into the shower and take a shower before they go to work. And so we have a bunch of indoor bike parking provided in the garage, and that's where we provided all our parking to start with. Because they could go park in the garage, hop into the fitness center, get cleaned up, and go to work, stay all day, reverse that, and leave. Staff's concern is short-term, people coming on bikes and just wanting to come up and say hi to somebody, visit somebody, come directly to Building 4. We have places in the basement of the garage to put some stalls, and we'll put some racks up in the plaza by the front entryway as well. So we fully intend to comply with that.
Right.
So from a staff perspective, if I'm understanding your questions, yes, one piece of it is there does need to be visitor parking, as Steve was suggesting, with racks in some of the plazas for the very reasons he identified. 25%, there isn't a code basis in the sense of a specific number. There is an expectation that bicycle parking is located where it will be close to, direct, convenient, and accessible. And I think our concern was there's kind of, and I don't know the percentages, but let's say 75% of the vehicular parking is in the garage, and 25% is under the building. I'm doing that in my head right now, so it's not true. But I think that there was an expectation that there should be an equal opportunity for distributing bike parking between the two buildings, and that while everything that Steve says is true, that some people may just want their bike parking in the same building where they are. They may feel more comfortable. We want to make it equally attractive, equally convenient in some of the same ways that we're doing with vehicular parking.
Okay, I guess my suggestion is, things like bike parking, usually, if you ask a bicyclist, they'll tell you how much they want in both, and instead of necessarily maybe a hard 25%, maybe your condition could be, an appropriate number of stalls would be located in building 4, something like that, to let them work it out.
My only hesitation is, I think we're all trying to have predictability because they're moving pretty fast.
Yeah.
So I certainly would support at least, but I don't think we're saying it shall be no more nor no less than 25%. And I think that your point is well taken, that there may be members of their bike community that can help guide them on that. And hopefully, maybe they could have that conversation before we come back, so that if we need to adjust the percentage, we can do it as part of the briefing.
Just don't want to
response.
hamstring them with.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jackie Frank, I actually had a conversation with our facilities guys. Architects drew one plan, and then there's the reality. And the reality is that there's a portion of subterranean parking under 4, and obviously there's parking in 5. So we will have lockable bike area, just like we do in buildings 2 and currently buildings 1 and 2. We will have subterranean lockable parking in building 4. We will have lockable parking in building 5 adjacent to the gym, and we'll have parking in the breezeway through block connection. We would do it regardless of a condition, and we'll provide ample parking for our folks. Well, it is a moot point, because we're going to do it anyway.
Yeah. I have a lot of questions. So the loading, Lucy, or Jean, I'm curious about I agree with the idea of not having 18 loading docks. And I was trying to figure out, where does 1 per 30,000 come from? I know it's in there, but I don't know where, but I guess, number one, I want to say I totally agree with allowing that administrative adjustment, but just also curious, maybe it's something in the future we could change, or.
Well, I don't know that it's I guess what I would say, Mel, is that what we've seen is that for smaller uses, it's probably accurate. Mm-hmm. For some of these really big uses, we had the same problem with Swedish Hospital. I think it was going to have 30 or some crazy number. And we also, I think even the Raleigh Hotel was way out of whack. And so some of these big and/or specialized uses, I mean, that's where the AAS is, I think, the Administrative Adjustment of Standards is vital, because they usually have very good, objective data that is the basis, and then we can tailor the use to really tailor the loading docks to the use. Yeah. As to the origins of that, I believe that those numbers have been here as long as I have, since before I was here. And the thing I would probably say that we discovered with car parking, we used to try and peel apart visitor and guest parking from either resident or employee parking because we allowed that on street. And we tried to figure out what that percentage was because, understandably, at some point, someone did some calculations and said, employees, you need this much for employees and this much for your retail customers or for your guests of the resident. But it's been bundled together so long, it's back in the mists of time, with the dinosaurs. And we don't really know where that came from. And so, as I said, I think it serves us well with smaller uses, but with larger uses, we really, we pretty much expect that we're going to get
Use
data to help us adjust it to the appropriate number.
Great, thank you.
More questions? Any more questions on Building 4? How about comments on Building 4? People have specific comments they would like to make?
And this is for our input to their decision.
Yes.
Yes, no?
No comments. While you're, go ahead.
I'll jump in, because I think our job is to provide them our opinions about the decision they'll be making, or input. I would take it a little bit more than one. My concerns about Building 4 were the blank wall, but given that it's dropped down, and I think you're working on that anyway, but since it's below grade, not as much of an issue. That sense of arrival, that end of the building, but it sounds like you're well aware of that too, and the importance of that. The through block passages and the calculation of the build to line satisfied what I thought about it. If they're attractive looking buildings, I think they've done a lot to make it an excellent place for both employees and from appearances for the public, and then the outside spaces for the employees, rooftop decks, all of that. And they're very nice looking buildings. I think they work great.
I think I'll chime in too. So I echo the comment about, I think they're very attractive. It's a very attractive building. I like the variations in materials. I think you've done a real nice job integrating the kind of the open space, the plazas, the East Plaza and the Central Plaza through the mid-block connection. I think that's going to be, because you've got the upper floor, the sky bridge is above, up higher. So it's going to be open and visible and attractive and inviting to pull people in. And so I think that is really well done. Still concerned about how you're going to deal with connection across the vehicular drive, but after your explanation, not as great a concern because it's a low traffic area, smaller trucks. We're not talking about people maneuvering around, semis backing up, et cetera. So I think that helps, but still you need to figure out how to define that in a way that's safe for people and recognizable to people that are providing deliveries. I like the lantern effect that you're creating, this arrival to the building. I think that will be interesting. How you work the lighting at night on that could be a trick, but I think that will be, I mean, we think about the buildings during the day, but they're also a real high impact at night if you treat them, with some effective lighting. You can create a whole different image, and I think you can do you're doing some really interesting stuff with that nighttime effect on the building. So I think that's really exciting. And then just as far as an inviting place for people to work, I think it will be great. And people who are traveling through here that don't work here, unfortunately not as invited in, but understand the deal. But it will be still attractive for people passing by. So I think that was well. Thank you.
Final comment?
Yeah, I'll also say that I think it's going to be a great-looking building. I think it's going to be really great for Costco as well to be able to bring more employees to Issaquah. I think that's great. As far as for the community, I think you guys are going to be doing something like this, but adding to or complementing the trail system around there, I think will go a really long way.
Last chance. How about questions on Building 5?
I have one, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, absolutely.
On page 180 of 272, In the SIDS checklist, section 14.2, there's a does not meet the standard check there. I was wondering what that means. Is it foreseen?
Can you give the page number again?
Yeah, sorry, that was
Maybe.
page 180 of 272.
Thank you.
And there's a check mark there in a does not meet, and I was wondering what that means. Is it foreseen that the use of the parking space may evolve over time? If so, is this related to a condition anywhere?
So there's quite a few standards in 14.2, and it could be, there's actually perhaps maybe a few of those standards where it does not comply. One of them is the avoid blank walls. And so we did include a condition for the blank walls at Building 5.
It seemed that the note involved evolution, use evolving over time, and I almost imagined a parking garage in a loft area, for example, that might go from a parking lot to loft space and requires flat flooring for that or something like that. I couldn't imagine. I was trying to envision how the use of this might evolve over time.
Because
I
I wonder if it's just 14.2A, but buildings shall be designed to accommodate many uses, so they may evolve over time, and are you saying the parking portions wouldn't be
Yes.
able to?
If I could interject, the last part of the note says, see sheet 31 and item 10.9. And when you go to 10.9, it's talking about blank walls. And I think that's what Gene was referring to.
Okay.
I think it's both.
It's both, yes. Yes, I mean, part of it is with the flexibility of space, it's a little more challenging to convert a parking garage use to a different use over time. And so I think,
A blank wall is definitely addressed by a condition. We have that. Yeah, I was
Right.
just wondering if there was something about a different use anticipated for that garage.
right, and I think the one thing that we identified is that, yes, the exhibition space in the fitness center, that could be repurposed over time, but not so much the parking areas.
Other questions on Building 5?
I have a question again, back on the walkway idea. If I understand the parking garage correctly, at 5 o'clock, people flowing out of here, and there's going to be a lot of cars coming out of Costco, and see, they'd be coming out that northeast exit, coming out, looking to their left, to get out, make sure there's no trucks coming or cars coming from the ramp from the other garage. They're making that quick right turn. I guess you're mentioning keeping the pedestrians on the north side of that walkway. It seems to me that that's a better idea. I'd be afraid of, at nighttime, a lot of people not being seen by a car pulling out of there. I would trust them to have a better vision of pedestrians if they want to cross the north side of that driveway and then came down like your proposal is.
So there are walkways on both sides in both proposals.
Yeah, and I think you said they were going to make the southern walkway
Right.
wider.
Right, and I think, I think one thing to think about, it's always hard to anticipate how buildings will actually be used.
Right.
I think part of our recommendation to maybe emphasize the south side over the north side in spite of that is that as with our walkers of Jackie and Keith, they're often out there at lunch. They're out there at morning breaks. They're out there at different times. I think the people who are going to the garage to get their car at 5 o'clock or coming out first thing in the morning, which is when you're going to have most of the traffic in and out of the garage, is not going to be the time when most people are walking. People who are using the garage are probably going to be using the Sky Bridge because it gets them into the building system. And so I think that was why we were comfortable moving it to that side is in sort of thinking it through, it didn't seem like the timelines were likely to have the overlap that would cause the concern that you're identifying.
Gotcha. Good point.
Can I, since we're talking about that through block connection there and then access, so what's the, I think it was in the staff report, I forgot the dimensions, but what's the width from wall to wall in the through block of the between the building?
37 feet.
37 feet, and then, what, a 4-foot sidewalk on?
We had a 24-foot wide drive aisle, and then we were doing a 5-foot sidewalk on the north and a 7.5-foot sidewalk on the south.
Okay. Because I'm just trying to kind of visualize what the experience will be like in that space when the garages are active. It's not going to be a very comfortable space to be in, I don't think. So I'm just wondering, what can you do to make that feel safer and a bit more, I mean, it's not going to be an inviting place to travel through when you've got a lot of cars coming in and out of there. It's pretty constrained, you've got a fairly low ceiling. It's a challenge, a design challenge.
It is.
So
We've said
I
that
think
from the
part of the
start.
reason why we made that a preliminary condition is that we wanted to, this came up towards the end of preparing the staff report, and we recognized that doing more detailed studies of that through block passage, looking at the dimensions, the wall treatments, it does have a 15-foot height, so it is
A little more.
a little taller than it appears unless
It's more
you-
than a garage deck height in there.
Exactly. But we want, Jean mentioned that in her presentation, we want to come back with more materials and more visuals and potentially refining the condition to give a better sense of what that experience is going to be.
I would appreciate that, because that's the one of the elements that I was scratching my head over a little bit as I was looking at the staff report and the plans, and going, okay, well, you want these through block connections to be, attractive and inviting and pull people through, and that will be challenging for this space. And so whatever you can do to kind of show how is this going to work to its highest potential to meet those objectives, I think would be useful. And then obviously the stuff that we were just talking about as far as safety of people that are, traveling with the cars through that same space.
I do have a question, or maybe a comment, but more a question about the last slide you showed, view from the north down Lake Drive, showing the garage to the right. If you can pull that one up again. I guess my one concern about this building is that view of the garage right there when you're coming south on Lake Drive. And Costco's built beautiful buildings and a beautiful campus. And I have the feeling that driving along there, even with the vendor event center, display center on the first floor lit up, I think that would be great. But seeing those, it looks to me like, 4 floors, even though it's got the trim and stuff, it's a pretty utilitarian structure on that corner, it appears to me. And I wondered if you thought about if there's something you can do, maybe even to the corner of that, to make it look less monolithic or something on those upper levels. less like a parking garage, or?
So, I had a similar reaction, and I was wondering, you talked about the lantern effect that you'd created at the corners at the south corner, and I don't know if there's something else or how that could work at that corner as you're creating another kind of a gateway element, because it is, I think the utilitarian description is probably a good one. As you look at that there's an opportunity to do something that's a little more striking, that kind of frames both sides of the street as you're traveling in that direction, that I think might be worth exploring.
Thank you.
One more question for Steve. The sky bridge that travels from the garage to the building, and I really appreciate that, raising it up, trying to create as much transparency as possible, because I know when we were dealing with the original land plan discussion here, it was like, okay, this is a view to the south, you've got the mountains, and let's not ruin it, let's try to enhance it. So I appreciate what you're doing with this. Just a simple question, though, as far as, is it a conditioned space, or is this going to be kind of open air? Since you're coming up from an unconditioned garage into a conditioned building, you could probably keep it unconditioned and kind of fresh until you get to the building, I suppose. But I don't know what your thinking on that is.
That's our intent. We're going to have a vestibule inside Building 4 where we make the transition, but the bridge itself will be unconditioned.
Okay. So, and we had a speaker earlier raising concerns about the greenhouse effect in that thing, so I
Yeah,
understand.
and so we still have to work that out to ventilate it all, but that will be the intent.
Other questions? No more questions? How about comments on Building 5? I have to say, I liked it for a parking structure. I thought it looked pretty decent. So not. I guess I support the notion of maybe some kind of lantern effect on the corners, but in general, for an urban parking structure, especially with the glass on the bottom, I think that really helped a lot. I thought it looked really good.
And I do like the uses you've put on the ground floor to have the exercise facility and the activity that goes with that, and vendor space and all that, having all that at the base of a parking garage instead of just vacant retail, you see so many places that I think you did a very nice job.
Thank you.
So I appreciate that too, knowing how challenging it is to meet that requirement of active uses on ground floors. And as a single user in an office campus, that makes it even particularly more challenging, since you don't add a bunch of separate retail uses, et cetera. I like the work that you're doing on sustainability. I think that's something that is of high value in this community, and as the major corporate resident here, citizens, that reflecting that back is, I think, really a positive thing to do, not only for Costco, but for the community. So I think that's setting the example. I think that's excellent. I agree that for a parking garage, again, challenging to keep it interesting. Got maybe a little bit more work to do, but I think out the chute, it's an interesting, for above-grade parking garage, I think your architectural treatments look good. That north corner would be the exception. The interface with the trail part, so a little bit more on that would be useful when we see this come back, is what will the public experience be as we're walking by this? Because if we've got retaining walls and things and you're kind of down in a hole, that's not good. So I think that will be useful for us to see a little bit more about that, because we want to really protect the public the public's experience, not only Costco employees that matter, but also the public will be walking through the campus and using the public trails that are adjacent to it. So I think that would be good to see that. And then, again, similar to the kind of discussion about the interface of the plaza, the East Plaza on 2nd Street, or 62nd, but the North Plaza here, what's this interface look like with the street, kind of the urban edge plaza? That will be interesting to see what you're doing with that. And I know you've provided some example treatments in the packet, but that, I think, was another piece, I think, that will be what we, the general public that don't wear a Costco badge, experience. And so I think we would like to see a little bit more about that. At least I would.
Yeah.
Those are my comments.
Other comments? Looks like is there other business to conduct?
If you're concluded with this permit, I think we can close the public hearing for this evening while leaving it open for our next meeting, which we anticipate to be October 3rd.
I'll do that.
Okay. And then I do have a couple of other matters I wanted to bring up.
I know there's other business to do, but at this point, the public hearing for this portion for Building 5 is over. We have some additional business. I'd like to thank members of the public. They can sit here and listen to that additional business if you want. But, and I guess just I have to say, I think the Costco group did an excellent job, and it's obvious that you worked real hard to meet the requirements and the conditions that were necessary, and it's greatly appreciated. And I think, I won't speak for the whole group, but I for sure think it'll be a real asset. So thank you.
I agree, thank you.
So other business. One is that we haven't met much this year. We need to elect your officers. We wouldn't do that tonight, but I would like to do that at the next regular meeting, which would be October 3rd. And so I just want you all to think about who would like to run for chairperson and vice chair of the commission, and we will have a fierce political battle. Yes.
Signs,
Yes.
Fundraising going on.
I'm looking for my button. So the other thing, we do have a special meeting on September 26th.
26? You do.
26th. It's not a regular meeting night, which is why I want to hold the election at the regular meeting. The special meeting will be unusual, really unusual. You guys are going to get your own legal counsel to advise you. And so the permits for that will go out later. The packet will go out. This is, Patrick's hanging around because, so the Issaquah Highlands Development Agreement ended. There are some permits that were in, and there are questions around vesting, which rules apply, and so the city will probably be represented by the city attorney. The applicant will probably be represented by their attorney, which is not Patrick, but someone else from his firm. And so because staff are normally neutral, but because we are defending ourselves against potential litigation, we may not be seen as neutral. So you'll get your own advisor We have identified a legal advisor. He's not a lawyer, he's a hearing examiner, and he will be here to help you, guide you through this process. It will be it'll be more like a trial, probably. There will be witnesses and exhibits and various things. We are still working this out. It will probably go for several nights, not consecutive nights, but it will probably not be concluded in one night. So I'm just giving you a heads up that September 26th will be special.
Can I ask a quick question about it?
Sure.
So we're in the role of deciding the standing of permits based on the
No, well,
maybe it's too early to ask that question.
yeah. So, they have permits that they have, the applicant has submitted permits. They have taken a certain position about how they should be moved forward. Staff have taken a different position about how they should be moved forward. And you will get a recommendation from the city.
Right.
And you will be asked either to uphold that I mean, that part of it is no different than what you normally do.
Right. But it'll be more on a technical issue of process. Is that right?
It will be also content.
Okay. So we're deciding on the permit. It's a permit decision.
It is a permit
Okay.
decision.
Okay, now I got it. Okay.
So, and is the UVDC on now?
No, but, and this is one of the matters is that under the development agreement, it would have gone to the UVDC, but the city's position is that because the development agreement has been terminated, and now all the permits in the
have
urban
standing.
villages that are not vested according to the city would come to the Development Commission. So I think you're beginning to see some of the issues that will be presented to
The
you.
UVDC only existed because of the development agreement, not just to have different workloads. In other words, when the development agreement goes away. it
Well,
went
there
away?
still are development agreements there are probably 8 development agreements in the city. And 4 of them were terminated this year or significantly modified this year. There remains Lakeside, Swedish, WashDOT, TDR, which is where Bellevue College is, Costco, although that comes to Development Commission. So it's not that there is not a purpose remaining for the UVDC. There just may not be very frequent activity. And I think that is a question the council will have to make a decision on in probably over the next 6 or 8 months. Is this the best way to use our volunteers, or is it important to have that standalone commission to serve the development agreements? And
Big fun. Okay.
I can't wait for sure. So let's adjourn.
yeah.
9:15.
Thank you, Gene.
Good job.
Good job.
Good job, Gene. Thank you.
Great.